Alright everybody, my name is Stephen Campbell, and I'm going to be the MC tonight. So on behalf of all of Badger Cru, it's incredible to see all of you guys here, and I want to welcome you to tonight's event. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with Badger Cru, we're an interdenominational Christian org here on campus, and we're here to be a spiritual resource for you, no matter where you're at in your spiritual journey. So how we do that, we have a variety of things. One being small group Bible studies all around campus. And our second is our large group meetings called Prime Time, which I believe there's a slide for. And that takes place every Thursday night at 9 p.m. in 3650 Humanities, which is the main lecture hall. So this Thursday, things are obviously a little bit different. And instead we've brought in a speaker and planned a time where we as Badgers can come together and discuss some incredibly important questions. So I know that in the conversations that I've had with some of you guys, as well as other discussions that I've heard leading up to this event, we're all coming in with unique feelings towards God, religion, and really how we view this world around us. Maybe you're sitting here tonight and you've been hurt by the church or by Christians in your life, and you're angry with them or with God. Or maybe you have no idea what you believe, and you're hoping to come and find some sort of answer. And many others of you are probably coming in and you believe that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. What I want to stress is that our hope for tonight is that no matter where you're at, that you would come in with an open mind, willing to challenge your beliefs and be open to the beliefs of others. With that sort of mindset, our hope is that as students we would begin to discuss the ideas and worldviews that we have with each other. And that in doing so, we'd begin to pursue a holistic liberal education at this truly liberal university. Not simply in the realm of academics, but also spirituality. So at this point, I'm going to hurry myself off stage and introduce our speaker for tonight. He served with the U.S. Navy for 8 years and has a master's from George Washington University, as well as a doctorate in apologetics from Southern Evangelical Seminary. He's an award-winning author and has taught courses in leadership and development at George Washington. On top of that, he's led training in leadership seminars in many large businesses, as well as appearing on several TV news shows. And he's done talks like this on campuses all around the United States. So if you'll welcome with me to the stage, Dr. Frank Turek.
Badgers. My name is Frank Turek. Before we get started, let me ask you this. How many of you have heard me before, or this is your first time? How many of you are here tonight? How many don't respond to surveys? It's an important question. Whenever you talk about, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, things are going to get controversial. Okay? So it's absolutely critical that you listen closely. Because if you don't listen closely, you can get the wrong idea, and you can walk away from here thinking, I said something that I didn't. It can be disastrous. Absolutely disastrous. You have to listen closely.
Das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät, das wissen wir. Das Gerät, das Überlebensradar.
This is the German Coast Guard. What are you thinking about?
I hope we're going to do a lot of thinking tonight, and the first question I want to ask you is, why are you here? I don't mean why you're here tonight, but why are you here on earth? What is the purpose of your life? This is the interactive portion of the program. I mean, why are we here? Is life just a glorified Monopoly game? Get a whole bunch of stuff now because when the game is over, it's all going to go back in the box? Is that what life's all about? One preacher in his congregation put it this way. He said, one day you are going to die. And they're going to dress you up in your best suit, your best outfit. They're going to dig a hole somewhere. They're going to put you in a box. They're going to lower you into that hole. Then they're going to throw dirt in your face and go back to the church and eat potato salad. Is that it? You just take a dirt nap for all eternity? There is no real meaning to life. Is it just a glorified Monopoly game? I mean, you can't take it with you, right? Imagine God does exist and there is an afterlife. You can't take, imagine if you could take it with you. Imagine you get to heaven and St. Peter says, hey, did you bring your stuff? You go, no, I didn't know you could bring your stuff. Oh, yeah, you could bring your stuff. Trump brought his stuff. You can't go back now. No, I don't think that's the way it really works. And if this man is right, he looks a little creepy to me. This is Francis Crick, who helped discover the DNA molecule. He had an astonishing hypothesis a number of years ago. In fact, that was the title of his book. Here's his astonishing hypothesis. He said, the astonishing hypothesis is that you, your joys, your sorrows, your memories, and your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. In other words, you are just a meat machine. This is materialism. That every thought you have is the result of a previous natural cause. You may think you're thinking, but you're not really thinking. You're not really reasoning, you're just reacting. You may think you have free will, but it's an illusion. There is no such thing as free will. There's no such thing as morality. There's no such thing as free will. There's no such thing as reason. Everything is just molecules in motion. Of course, if Crick is right, then there is no ultimate meaning to life. You die, you become worm food. That's it. I actually think there is a real meaning to life, and you can find that meaning in this ancient collection of manuscripts we put under one binding we now call the Bible. Now, when you say that on a college campus, like we're at now, people look at you like you have three heads. Are you kidding me? How can you believe this book is true? First of all, it's got miracles in it. We don't believe in miracles anymore. David Hume disproved miracles. You ought not believe in miracles. It was written by religious people who made things up. They wrote it down much later than the events actually occurred. This is myth. This is legend. May have some nice moral stories in it, but that's about it. I actually think this book is true. And there's really only 4 questions you need to answer in the affirmative to show that this book is true. In other words, if you answer yes to these 4 questions, you can say beyond any reasonable doubt that the Bible is true. Beyond all doubt, no. Quite obviously, I could be wrong about this. I'm not an omniscient being. Maybe I have it wrong. But if you answer yes to these 4 questions, you can show beyond any reasonable doubt the Bible is true. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. That is some pretty groovy music, isn't it? Yes, of course. That is actually from our TV show, which is on every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. at midnight Central Time on DirecTV channel 378, and also on Saturdays at 9. How many people here have DirecTV? Can I see your hands, please? DirecTV. Like 6 of us. Come on, why not the rest of us? Friends, don't let friends watch cable. If you want to get out and have enough faith to be an atheist, you got to get DirecTV. Actually, that's not true. If you go to our website at those times, crossexamined.org, and click on TV show, you can watch it live, streaming. It's not archived, it's streaming, if you really want to see it. And we're also on, by the way, on radio every Saturday mornings at, that's Pacific time. This should really be, 9 a.m. Central Time. I was just in California, that's why I didn't change that. It's on 144 stations. I don't know if there's one here in Madison or not, but that is live on the internet and also podcast. If you go to iTunes, you can find it. What we do is we present evidence for Christianity and we cross-examine ideas against it. Now, why are these the 4 questions? Truth, God, miracles, and the New Testament. Well, question number 1. If there is no truth, if it's just true for you but not for me, or all truth is relative, or there are no absolutes, I mean, you hear these things all the time, then quite obviously the Bible can't be true. Of course, if there is no truth, then any book written by an atheist can't be true either. Like The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. This book can't be true if there's no truth. Yeah, there's got to be a problem with people who claim there is no truth. There is, we'll get to it. Second question is, does God exist? There can't be a word from God if there's no God. If there's no God, throw the Bible away and every other book that talks about God. But I hope to show you tonight through two scientific arguments and one philosophical argument, that there really is a theistic God out there. What do I mean by a theistic God? A spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator. These three arguments we're going to look at are taught in the Bible, but you don't need the Bible to know them. In fact, we're not even really going to talk much about the Bible tonight. Then we're going to look at question number 3. Are miracles possible? Obviously, the Bible can't be true if miracles are not possible. If miracles aren't possible, throw this book away and every other book that talks about miracles. I hope to show you tonight, however, that not only are miracles possible, but the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred and we have scientific evidence for it. We'll look at that evidence tonight. Then and only then can we get to question 4. The key question, is the New Testament true? The New Testament doesn't have a prayer if truth doesn't exist, God doesn't exist, or miracles are not possible. But if truth exists, if God exists, if miracles are possible, then we can see if we have an accurate, historically reliable account of miracles occurring in the 1st century to a man named Jesus and his apostles, as recorded in the 27 handwritten Greek manuscripts we now call the New Testament. Did those writers tell the truth, or were they written down by people much later than the events? They were written down by religious people who just sort of made it up. Okay? Now some of you are looking at that and going, well, what about the Old Testament? You believe the Old Testament is true? If the New Testament is true, you get the Old Testament thrown in. Why? Who's in the New Testament that can authenticate the Old Testament? Jesus, yes. If Jesus really is God, good guess. If Jesus really is God, as the New Testament documents claim he is, now that's a big if, but if he really is God, then whatever God teaches is true. Jesus taught the entire Old Testament is the Word of God, so if the New Testament's reliable, you get the Old Testament thrown in. Now, in the time we have here, there's no way I can cover all this material. In fact, the book is 448 pages. I probably could cover it because I'm originally from New Jersey, okay? I speak at 150 words a minute with gusts of 350, okay? So I move really quickly. If you can't keep up, the book is available, not here, but the book is available on our website, as well as a 12-part DVD set and even a curriculum, if you're really interested in this kind of thing. And by the way, all the proceeds from the sale of the books, the curriculum, the DVD, will go to feed needy children. Mine. Okay. Just so you know, I've got 3 sons. 2 of them are already through college. The last one's still in college, so we still need some help. In fact, they all went to South Carolina. They're all Gamecocks. The oldest went through Air Force ROTC. I went through Navy ROTC, which, by the way, Navy stands for Never Again Volunteer Yourself. So I said, hey, you want to fight? To my sons, I said, you want to fight? Go Navy. Want a nice life? Go Air Force. They went Air Force. Anyway. So they went through Air Force ROTC. The oldest son is now an intelligence officer in Las Vegas with the guys that fly the drones. Did you know that all the drones that are flown in the war zones out there are flown from Las Vegas? And you thought there was no real-world application for Xbox. There is. Keep practicing. Xbox gamers make the best drone pilots, I'm telling you. The second son is in flight school in Del Rio, Texas, right on the Rio Grande. He's just about halfway through. He just transitioned to what are called T1s, and he's supposed to get his wings in August, so he's all fired up. The third son is a junior. He's not in Air Force ROTC. He's just an engineer in South Carolina, which means for about the past 2.5 years, my wife and I have been empty nesters. Took us a while to get used to that. About 10 minutes. Yeah, that's how long it took to change the locks. Do we have any empty nesters in here? I see some of our more seasoned citizens in here. Any You notice how clean the house stays when they're gone? I mean, it's amazing. We love our kids, but they're messy. Anyway, there's our website, crossexamine.org. So we're going to go through this material very quickly. In fact, here's what we're going to do tonight. In fact, if I time this just right, we'll have absolutely no time for your questions. No. We'll have time for your questions. We'll have microphones set up. But what we're going to do tonight is we're going to cover points 1 and point 2. And then we're going to take your questions. Because this thing is normally done in 2 parts. And so maybe next semester we'll come back and do points 3 and 4. But what we're going to cover tonight in detail is point 1 and point 2. And then take questions. Is that cool? All right. Let's start with the... Oh, bye. If you want to Twitter on this, there you go. Anyway, let's start with the question of truth. The question of truth. And whenever you start talking about truth, you always have to start with Jack Nicholson. Right? I mean, Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand. He said to him, Colonel, I want the truth. And what did Nicholson say? No, he did not say it that way. Try it again. Colonel, I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. That's right. That's the way he said it. Say it like you're from Jersey. Well, you know, there's a lot of people in our culture today that can't handle the truth. They're saying, you got your truth, I got my truth, there is no truth. We'll get to that in a minute, but let's define what we mean by truth. Here's an easy definition of truth. Truth is telling it like it is. If I say, here we are at the University of Wisconsin at Madison, that would be telling it like it is. If I say, here we are at North Carolina State, where I'll be Monday night, that wouldn't be telling it like it is. Or you might say that truth is what corresponds to its referent. If I'm referring to this book, I say it's a black Bible, that's true. If I say it's a white Quran, that wouldn't be true. You say, Frank, I came out tonight for this. This is so obvious. Why are you starting here? Because our first duty is to state the obvious. There's a lot of people out there denying there's truth, so I thought we'd define our terms. Now, hold on to this definition of truth. We're going to come back to it. We need to talk about the law of non-contradiction. The law of non-contradiction is a fundamental rule of all thought. It helps us discover what is false. It says that opposite ideas cannot both be true at the same time and in the same sense. For example, the earth can't be both round and not round at the same time and in the same sense, right? I mean, it's either round or it's not round, but it's not both. You with me on this? Okay, this makes sense. You say, I see where you're going with this, Frank. The problem is, what am I, a rock star now? Thanks a lot. Get Beyonce up here. The problem is, Frank, this does not apply to religious claims. Actually, it does apply to religious claims, the law of non-contradiction. A lot of people think religion is just about faith and subjective feelings and all this. Let me give you the most basic religious claim out there. Here it is. Does God exist? The man on the right is probably the most famous atheist in the world today. His name is Richard Dawkins, Oxford professor. He says God does not exist. He wrote the book, The God Delusion, multi-bestseller. He says you're deluded if you believe in God. The man on the left is Professor John Lennox, also teaches at Oxford University. He's written several books in support of God and Christianity. He says God does exist. Now here's my question. Can both of these men be right about this particular question? No, obviously they both can't be right. If Dawkins is right, Lennox is wrong. If Lennox is right, Dawkins is wrong. But they're both not right and they're both not wrong. Right? So who's right here? Let me give you a hint. It's Lennox, all right? I'm actually going to give you evidence that it's Lennox. Just now, the only reason I'm doing this now is just to show you the law of non-contradiction applies to religious claims. Now, by the way, if you want to see a super fantabulous debate, you need to go and see the debate. These gentlemen have debated about 3 times. There's a debate on our website. If you go to crossexamine.org, go to the blog and type in Lennox Dawkins in the search engine, you want to see this debate. Because these two gentlemen are brilliant, both of them, and they both have British accents, so they sound even more brilliant. And it's not like a dueling speech debate, you know, those classic debates where one guy reads a speech and the other guy, it's not like that. They just sit down and they talk, and they go back and forth. And Lennox is just a jovial Irishman. You just can't not like him. He's just happy all the time. And as you know, Dawkins can be a little cranky in a fun way, all right? In any event, one guy who saw the debate reviewed it this way. He said, watching John Lennox debate Richard Dawkins was like watching Santa Claus debate the devil. It's fun. You got to see it, so check it out. Hold on, the law of non-contradiction, because the law of non-contradiction is undeniable. Even those who deny it use it. Suppose you catch a friend of yours in a contradiction and you say, hey, that's contradictory, and your friend just doesn't want to hear it. He says, look, I don't even believe in the law of non-contradiction. What should you say to him? You should say, you do believe in it. He's going to say, no, I don't. You say, you do believe in it. He says, no, I don't. You say, you do believe in it. In fact, you're using it right now to contradict me. You see, you can't think a thought without the law of non-contradiction. The law of non-contradiction is to thinking what your eyes are to seeing. You can't see without eyes, and you can't think without the law of non-contradiction. It's just part of the furniture of the universe. It's an immaterial reality, as are the other laws of logic, that we access to communicate with one another. We couldn't understand one another without these laws. They're unchangeable, metaphysical, beyond the physical laws. And we all use them every day. In fact, there was a great Muslim philosopher a number of years ago. His name was Avicenna. And he had a great way of convincing those who denied the law of non-contradiction that they were wrong. Here's what Avicenna said. He said, anyone who denies the law of non-contradiction should be beaten and burned. Until he admits to be beaten is not the same as not to be beaten, and to be burned is not the same as not to be burned. Right? Being beaten is not the same as not being beaten. being burned is not the same as not being burned. Now, let me just point out right here that this tactic is not condoned by Cru here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Just want you to let you know that. But it does bring the point home, doesn't it? All right, hold on to that. We're going to come back to it. Let's talk again about truth. I'm here to say that all truth is absolute. Something that is true for all persons at all times in all places. There are no relative truths. You say, wait, Frank, I can think of a relative truth right now. Like what? Well, earlier today, when it was snowing on my way in here, you might have felt cold. But I'm sure the people in Hawaii, they felt warm. That's relative. No, it's not relative at all. It's absolutely true for all people at all times in all places that when referring to you today, you felt cold, if in fact you really did. Remember, truth is what corresponds to its referent. And it's absolutely true for all people at all times in all places when referring to the people in Hawaii today, they felt warm, if in fact they really did. Truth is just truth. Now, when you say all truth is absolute, people will claim that you are very judgmental. In fact, they're going to come back at you with a number of objections. You've heard these objections. Maybe you've used them yourselves on occasions. Here's what one of the objections is. There is no truth. Anyone ever say to you, hey, there is no truth? When people say that, I say, why aren't you even coming to college then? I mean, think about it. You're paying $40,000 a year, whatever it is, to learn what? If not truth, what? Secondly, they might say you can't know truth. Or they might say, all truth is relative. Or one of my favorites, it's true for you, but not for me. Well, Christianity may be true for you, but Buddhism is true for me. You say that. Or they might say, no one has the truth. Or if they really get annoyed with you, they might say, you know what, you just ought not judge. Especially if you're a Christian, they're going to say, Jesus said don't judge, why are you judging? You're a Christian. I can't believe it. Narrow-minded. How can you be judging? Now, if you can't answer these claims, then quite obviously you can't say this book is true. Of course, if you're an atheist and you can't answer these claims, then you couldn't say that Richard Dawkins' book is true. So there's got to be a problem with these claims. There is. What's the problem? They all violate the law of non-contradiction. So they can't be true. That's why we had to spend a little bit of time with the law of non-contradiction. And if you don't learn anything else from what we talk about here tonight, whether you're an atheist or a Christian or anywhere in between, if you learn this one idea down, or this one idea tonight, it'll be worth your time. I did not know this idea until I was 33 years old in seminary. To show you what a doofus I was for 33 years. I mean, I knew the law of non-contradiction, but I didn't know I knew it. I didn't know how to apply it. And if you learn how to apply the law of non-contradiction, it's going to save you a lot of time in your hunt for truth. And here's the way to handle these claims. Your greatest tool is to apply the claim to itself. Apply the claim to itself. Let me give you an example of this. Suppose somebody were to walk into this room right now and stand up and say, I can't speak a word in English. What would you say to them? Hey, didn't you just say that in English? Can everybody see that this is a self-defeating claim? That when you apply the claim to itself, it self-destructs? A self-defeating claim is like saying I can't speak a word in English, or it's like saying my parents had no kids that lived. Or my brother is an only child. Or everything I say is a lie. Some of you will get that tomorrow. Or all generalizations are false. Some of you will never get that one. Now we call this process of turning a claim on itself, we call it in the book the Roadrunner tactic. Why? Because it reminds us of Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. What's Wile E. Coyote's only mission in life? To catch the Roadrunner, right? I don't know why. This Roadrunner does not look like quite a tasty meal. But anyway, Coyote's after him, and just as it looks like he's about to grab him, Roadrunner stops short of the cliff, Coyote goes blowing by him, and he's hanging in midair until he realizes what? He's got no ground to stand on, and he plummets to the valley floor in a heap. That's exactly what you can do to people who utter self-defeating statements. You can show them that their argument has no ground to stand on, that it's foundationless, that it can't be true. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. So let's use the law of non-contradiction and this tactic on some of these claims we hear. For example, if somebody were to say to you there is no truth, you want to turn that claim on itself and ask one question. What should the question be? Yeah, simply ask the question, hey, is that true? Is it true that there is no truth? Because if it's true that there is no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true. Did I say that right? That is a self-defeating claim. Now with this one little tactic, you look like a super genius. All right? Just turn the claim on itself. How about this one? There's no such thing as absolute truth. You've probably heard that. If someone would ever say that to you, what should you say to them? Yeah, you could say, is that absolutely true? If you want to have a little fun, you can say, hey, are you absolutely sure? Okay, with this one little tactic, you look like a super genius. How about this one? This one is a little bit more subtle, but it's also self-defeating. Somebody says, it's true for you, but not for me. What should you say to them? Simply say, is that going to be true for me? True. You're close. All you need to say, true for you, but not for me. Hey, is that true for everybody? Is true for you, but not for me, true for everybody? Because if true for you, but not for me is true for everybody, then true for you, but not for me can't be true because it's true for everybody. Did I say that right? I know that can give you intellectual constipation if you think about it. But that's because it's self-defeating. It doesn't meet its own standard. Actually, there's a more fun way of dealing with this. If somebody says it's true for you, but not for me, say, sure, go try that with your bank teller. You go to your bank teller one day and say, look, the economy's down, I need some extra money, give me $100,000 out of my account. Bank teller looks at your account and says, I'm sorry, you only have $47.12 in your account. Easy to get the money. You somebody say, that's true for you, but not for me. Give me the 100 grand. You're going to get the money? No, if it's true there was only $47.12 in your account, that's true for all people at all times in all places when referring to your account at that time. It's just true. Or let's suppose you're going a little fast down Highway 94 here on your way to Milwaukee. Cop sees you, pulls you over, you're going 90. Walks up to your car, knocks on the glass, put the glass down. He says, you're going 90 in a 55. Never fear. So we look at him and go, that's true for you, but not for me. You speed away! I can't give you a ticket if it's not true for you. No, if it's true you were going 90, that's true for all people at all times and all places when referring to you at that time. I go to a lot of churches, and sometimes I'll ask the church congregation, I'll say, hey, do you believe this book is true? And of course, most people will say yes, and then I'll say, why do you believe it's true? Do you know what answer I get more than any other, unfortunately? Because I have faith. Is that a good answer? Does your faith change whether or not this book is true? Does your faith change whether or not God exists or Jesus rose from the dead? No, your faith doesn't change a thing about those things. Either God exists or He doesn't exist, regardless of what you believe about it. Either Jesus rose from the dead or He didn't, regardless of what you believe about it. You say, why is the Bible always talking about faith then? Because there's two kinds of faith. There's belief that, and then there's belief in. Belief that is getting evidence that God exists, that Jesus rose from the dead, that the Bible is true. That's what some Christians call apologetics. You're not apologizing for anything, you're giving evidence for it. It comes from the Greek word which means to defend. Get evidence that it's true. But the second kind of faith is belief in. And that's when you trust in. The better word in our culture today would be trust, because faith has this connotation you don't have any evidence for it. That's not biblical faith. It's once you know that it's true, then trust in it. The first is a matter of the mind. The second is a matter of the mind and the will. When I first met my wife about 28 years ago, I got evidence that she would be a good wife. But all the evidence in the world didn't make her my wife. I had to take a step of trust in her to ask her to be my wife. And in a momentary lapse of judgment, she said yes. In fact, according to the Bible, even the demons believe that God exists. James chapter 2 verse 19 says the demons know that God exists. They know better than we do, but they don't trust in Him. Why don't they trust in Him? Because they don't want to trust in Him. And a lot of times we don't want to trust in Him. So there's a difference between belief that and belief in. According to Christian theology, belief that won't get you quote-unquote saved. Only belief in will. Why? Because God won't force you into heaven against your will. If you don't want Him now, you're not going to want Him in eternity. How about this? You hear this a lot. There's no truth in anything but science. In fact, Richard Dawkins has begun to teach this. This is called scientism. Very popular view. We get all our truth from science. There's just one little problem. What's the problem? Can anyone see it? What would you say to somebody who said that? Simply ask, is that a scientific truth? Can you go in the laboratory and prove that? No, that's a philosophical claim. In fact, what's so often forgotten is that science is built on philosophy. In fact, everything is built on philosophy, which includes the laws of logic. We can't do anything without those things, including science. So to say that all truth comes from science is a self-defeating claim. In fact, I don't have a lot of time to get into this now. Maybe we can do it during the Q&A. But let me just say this. You know the big argument between, say, the intelligent design people and the Darwinists? It's not a debate over evidence. Everyone's looking at the same evidence. You know what's debate over? It's debate over philosophy. It's debate over what causes will we consider possible before we look at the evidence. And then once we have the evidence, how will we interpret it? That involves philosophy. In fact, there's an article on our website titled this, "Science doesn't say anything, scientists do." All data needs to be interpreted. How do you interpret the data? That's philosophy. Science doesn't tell you anything. It just gives you the data, then you have to interpret it. But you can't get all your truth from science. Science can't even justify itself. How about this Immanuel Kant, who said, you can't know the real world. How many in here have heard of Immanuel Kant? Can I see your hands, please? Pretty educated crowd here. Many of us have. Immanuel Kant, philosopher, lived a couple hundred years ago. He and David Hume have had a great impact on the way we think now. And Kant basically believed that you can't know the real world. Why? Because there's a real world out there. But when the phenomena from the real world gets to your mind categorizes it in such a way that you can't know the real world in itself. You can only know what your mind does to it. Leave it to a philosopher to come up with this. Now, it sounds all good and everything, except there's one little problem. It violates the law of non-contradiction. So if Kant were to ever say you can't know the real world, what question should you ask him? Yeah, then how do you know that about the real world? Why can Kant know about the real world, but we can't? You see, he exempts himself from his own theory. That's the problem with relativism and postmodernism. People who are relativists and postmodernists exempt themselves from their own theory. They say they have objective truth, but nobody else does. That's self-defeating. How about this one? You should doubt everything. This is a skeptical claim. Someone ever say to you, you should doubt everything? What should you say? Hey, should I doubt that? You see, why are skeptics skeptical of everything but skepticism? They don't doubt skepticism. By the way, let me ask you guys a question. I don't care whether you're a Christian, atheist, anywhere in between. How many of you in here, on occasion, doubt that what you believe is true? I'm raising my hand right now, because I doubt it sometimes too. In fact, if you're not doubting, you're probably not thinking. Right? I mean, some days I wake up, I go, I don't even know if there's a God. You ever do that? Are you Christians in here? So maybe some atheists wake up and go, maybe there is. You start doubting, right? But when I start doubting, I realize that most of my doubts are emotional, they're not intellectual. In other words, I think the evidence for Christianity is quite good, particularly even for theism, better than even for Christianity, that there's a God out there. And so some days, when things are good, I don't doubt. When other days things are bad, I do doubt. What's changed? Have the facts changed? No, facts haven't changed. I've changed. Emotionally, I'm swinging. In fact, a friend of mine who does some of these seminars like this sometimes, he's a Christian apologist, he's emotionally up and down. In fact, he says, before I have my first cup of coffee in the morning, I'm an atheist. You know, what's changed? The facts? No, he's changed. And so when I start considering my doubts, I realize, you know, the facts haven't changed, I've changed. And so maybe what I ought to do is I ought to start doubting my doubts. Because if I start doubting my doubts, then I'm back to knowing something for sure. Have you guys ever thought about doubting your doubts? Okay. Oh, this is the granddaddy of them all. You ought not judge. Forget what Jesus said for just a second. Let's just look at it logically. What's the problem with you ought not judge? Someone ever say to you, you ought not judge? What should you say to them? Yeah, isn't that a judgment? Or you can put your hands on your hips and say, then why are you judging me for judging? See, because that's what they're doing. By the way, did Jesus say don't judge? No, what did he say? Let's assume for a moment the New Testament documents are reliable. In Matthew chapter 7, Jesus says, judge not, lest you be judged. By the same standard you judge others, you be judged by that standard. So before you try and take the speck out of your brother's eye, take the log out of your own eye first, then you'll be better able to help your brother. Is Jesus telling us not to judge here? No, he's telling us to judge. He's telling us to take the speck out of our brother's eye. That involves making a judgment. He's simply saying, get the problem out of your life first so you can better help your brother. So this is not a command not to judge, it is a command on how to judge. So in other words, don't judge hypocritically. It would be complete suicide to say don't make judgments. Everybody makes judgments. You made 100 judgments today between right and wrong, good and evil, safe choices from dangerous choices. Everybody makes judgments. Christians, agnostics, Muslims, Buddhists, everybody makes judgments. The only question is, are your judgments true? I will say this about Jesus, though. He did save a very stern rebuke for people who were judgmental. And who were the judgmental ones in his day? Pharisees. And who were the Pharisees? They were the religious and political leaders of Israel. They ran Israel. And Jesus went after them. Are you telling me Jesus got involved in politics? Yes! He scolded the political leaders of Israel. And he wasn't very nice doing it. For those of you that think Jesus was just a soft, sweet guy who never said a bad word about anyone, you have not read Matthew chapter 23. Go read Matthew chapter 23. What does Jesus say, among other things, to the Pharisees? Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, you look great on the outside. You're whitewashed tombs, but on the inside, you're full of dead men's bones. You go a mile to make a convert, and once you make them a convert, you make them twice as much a son of hell as you are. How will you avoid being condemned to hell? What? Sweet and gentle Jesus said this? Yes, Jesus was not Barney. Can't we all just get along, boys and girls? No! He was not Mr. Rogers. Can you say kindness, boys and girls? Well, he was kind a lot of the time, but sometimes he wasn't. In fact, he certainly didn't go around saying, this sermon brought to you by the letter E. No, Jesus was tough. Sometimes he was very direct. And you might have to be direct with people around you. In fact, if you're not direct with them, you might be enabling them. Of course, maybe you're the one that has to have somebody slap you upside your head. So if someone slaps you upside your head after the sermon goes, hit you right upside your head, just say, but the speaker told me to do that. That's all. He said, I need to slap you upside your head. No, Jesus sometimes was tough. We can't buy into this idea that, in fact, how many times have you heard this? Oh, that person is such a saint. That person has never said a bad word about anyone. Well, if that's the definition of a saint, Jesus was no saint. Because he sometimes called it as it was, and it was uncomfortable. Now, I'm not saying we've got to go around being mean-spirited. I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying there's a time to be very direct, and Jesus was. Now, there's many more of these we could do. Like if somebody says, all truth is relative, you would ask them what question? Come on, you guys are getting this by now. All truth is relative, you ask the question what? Is that a relative truth? Somebody says, all truth depends on your perspective. You would say, does that truth depend on your perspective? You're getting it now. It's quite easy. In fact, this is an easy way for you to be a lie detector, the roadrunner tactic. When you learn how to apply the claim to itself, you become a great lie detector, which reminds me of Homer Simpson. Check this out.
Now we're going to run a few tests. This is a simple lie detector. I'll ask you a few yes or no questions, and you just answer truthfully. Do you understand?
Yes.
Can everybody see that's a self-defeating statement, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, very good. Let's sum this whole thing up. The truth about truth. Contrary beliefs are possible, but contrary truths are not possible. You can believe everything's true, but everything can't be true. You can believe the earth is flat if you want. Don't make it so. Objective truths can't be denied without being affirmed. Suppose somebody says there are no objective truths. What should you say to them? Use the roadrunner tactic. Apply the claim to itself. Say, is that an objective truth? If it is, it defeats itself. It's like saying I can't speak a word in English. If it's not, if it's just a truth in you, the subject, in other words, it's just your opinion, then why should I believe it? You see, you can't get away from objective truth. There's just one problem. We tend to suppress objective truth when we don't like it. In fact, Pascal said something very pithy about this. He said, people almost invariably arrive at their beliefs not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive. You Christians believe in Christianity because you find it attractive that when you die you're going to go see your loved ones and Jesus and all that? What if it isn't true? You who atheists, are you just an atheist because you don't want to have any moral accountability to anybody else other than yourself? And you like the idea of there being no judgment in the afterlife? We all have to look at ourselves, right? Maybe we're just believing this because we find it attractive. I hope not. I hope we believe it because it's true. So, the next question is it true that God exists? And here's where we're going to spend the rest of our time until we get to your questions. But let me just sum up what we've done so far. If our reasoning is good to this point, we've just defeated or pointed out two things that can't be true. One is relativism, and a sister belief system to that is called postmodernism. Those belief systems can't be true because they contradict they contradict the law of non-contradiction. In other words, there is truth out there. So if our reasoning is good to this point, we've rescued the possibility that the Bible is true or the possibility that Richard Dawkins' book is true. Right? That's all we've done to this point. Now we're going to take a look at the question, does God exist? Now, when we talk about God, we've got to define our terms, right? Because there's a lot of different concepts of God out there. We're going to talk here about a theistic God. What's a theistic God? A theistic God is a being who's beyond the world, who created the world, sustains the world. A theistic God is roughly like a painter is to a painting. Michelangelo paints the painting, his attributes are expressed in the painting, but Michelangelo is not the painting. The worldview that believes the creator is the creation is called pantheism. In fact, you can look at or pour most world religions into one of these three worldviews. The one here on the left is called theism. God made all. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are all theistic worldviews. You see a hand under the world. God creates the universe and He sustains it to this day, but He is not the universe. He is distinct from His universe as a painter is from a painting. His attributes are expressed in the universe. You can detect God by His creation, and part of His creation is the universe and you, but He's not the universe and He's not you. The next worldview is called pantheism. You just see the hand in the world. God is me, God is you, God is the grass, God is the trees, God is all things. God is all. Zen Buddhism, Hinduism, and the New Age are all pantheistic. You know Zen Buddhism. Use the Force, Luke. The whole Star Wars series is Zen Buddhism. There's a good force and a bad force, but it's not personal. There's not a theistic God. Everything's God. Now, if you really think about that for a minute, you'll realize that this one and the next one I'm about to put up here are really indistinguishable, evidentiary-wise. Why? What's the last one? You don't see a world at all, or hand at all, you just see a world. That's atheism, no God at all. What's the difference between saying there is no God and everything's God? There's no way to distinguish. It's just semantics at this point. You're calling everything God, or you're saying that just the universe exists. Now we're about to give evidence for theism. And we're going to give three arguments. There are more arguments than this for theism, but these are the three that we cover in some detail in the book. And there are two scientific and one philosophical. The first argument is from the beginning of the universe, known as the cosmological argument. Cosmological comes from the Greek word cosmos, which means world or universe. It says if the universe had a beginning, it must have had a beginner. The second argument is the argument from design, known as the teleological argument. Telos, meaning design or purpose. If there's design in the universe, if there's design in you, then there must be a designer. Now, these two arguments, as I said, are scientific in nature. You can get evidence for these by either looking through a telescope or looking into a microscope, which we'll do briefly. The third argument, however, is not scientific at all. It's more philosophical in nature, yet it's the argument we've all known since we were very small children, and it's the argument from morality known as the moral argument. And it goes like this. If there's one thing really morally wrong out there, like it's wrong to torture babies for fun, or it's wrong to murder 6 million Jews in a Holocaust, then there has to be a God. Why? Because if there is no God, that's just your opinion against Hitler's opinion. If there's no standard beyond humanity to adjudicate opinions, then all you have are opinions. We'll get into that argument a little bit later. Let's start with the first one, the cosmological argument. And this is the argument that many say points to the big... some Christians are going, Franco, we're Christians. We don't believe in the Big Bang. You guys don't believe in the Big Bang? I believe in the Big Bang. I just know who banged it. In fact, the evidence for the Big Bang is quite good. You even have atheistic scientists admitting that space-time and matter began at the Big Bang. Stephen Hawking said almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Alexander Vilenkin, an agnostic astronomer from Tufts University, wrote a book in 2006 called Many Worlds in One. And here's what he said in the book. He said, with the proof now in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is now no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Now, there's a couple interesting words in this quote from Vilenkin. First is the word proof. Very unusual for scientists to use the word proof. Normally they say the evidence points to, the evidence suggests. In Vilenkin's opinion, and remember, science doesn't say anything scientific, he's interpreting the data to say, it really is strong that I'm calling it a proof that the universe had a beginning. And the other interesting word is the word problem. Why is it a problem? There's a cosmic beginning. Why? Because it gets too close to the G word. Scientists don't want to go to God. In fact, Einstein himself did something that a third grader wouldn't do, mathematically, to avoid the implication of a beginning. We'll get to that in a couple of minutes. Let me mention one thing here about this guy, Vilenkin. Vilenkin is a believer in the multiverse. I don't know if you've heard of the multiverse before, but the idea here is that there are many universes out there, and we just happen to be in the one that looks designed. That quite possibly could be true. But Vilenkin says, along with Guth and Bohr, two other cosmologists, that even if there is a multiverse out there, the whole show needs an absolute beginning. In fact, he just wrote a paper in 2012, about a year ago. He did a lecture at Stephen Hawking's 70th birthday in Cambridge. And the end of his lecture basically says, all the evidence points to the fact that the universe had a beginning. What do I mean by the universe? Space, time, and matter had a beginning. And he's an agnostic. Now, what is the evidence? Well, we're going to give you 5 lines of scientific evidence that begin with a letter, and they're in an acronym, SURGE, S-U-R-G-E. All this evidence is in Chapter 3 of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. I'm just going to list them here, and then we'll go through them very briefly. The S stands for the fact that the second law of thermodynamics shows that the universe had a beginning. The U stands for the fact that the universe is expanding, discovered by Hubble in 1929. The R stands for the radiation afterglow. I'll get to that in a minute. The G stands for the great galaxy seeds, ditto, and E stands for Einstein's theory of general relativity. These 5 lines of scientific evidence are showing just about all scientists, or causing all scientists to admit, look, space-time and matter had a beginning out of absolutely nothing. Let's start with the second law of thermodynamics, which basically says the universe is running down. It's running out of usable energy. As time goes on, the amount of energy in the universe is running down. All scientists know that one day that sun up there is going to burn out. We're going to go to heat death. They say, don't worry about it though, it's several billion years from now. Of course, up here in Wisconsin, you think that happens every winter. Right? You say, well, how does this show the universe had a beginning? Well, suppose I were to take a flashlight, turn it on here on this table, we were to leave and come back tomorrow. What would the strength of the beam coming out of the flashlight be tomorrow? It would be weak, if not gone completely. Why? Because there's only so much juice in those batteries. There's only so much energy in those batteries. And the longer that the flashlight is on, the less and less energy you'll have. Well, let's look at it another way. Suppose we turned the flashlight on an infinitely long time ago. Would there be any light coming out of it right now? No. Well, think of the universe as a dying flashlight. Think of the universe as having batteries. If the universe has been in existence forever, there was no beginning, we'd be out of energy by now. But we're not. We still have energy. The lights are still on. The sun is still burning, which is showing us that the universe had a beginning. In fact, the second law of thermodynamics is also called the law of entropy, the law of disorder, that things go to disorder rather than order. The second law of thermodynamics is why you have to maintain a building, why you got to put new carpet down, or why you got to put gas in your car, why you have to get a new car. Things run down. In fact, you can put it this way. Nature will take a building and turn it into a pile of bricks. But nature will never take a pile of bricks and turn it into a building. Okay? Things go from order to disorder unless somebody, some intelligence, assembles them. Now, the U in Surge stands for the fact the universe had a beginning. Anyone know who that guy is right there? That's Edwin Hubble. Now, for some reason, back in the 30s, they thought it was cool to have your picture taken with a pipe. Now, as you know, Hubble has a telescope named after him, circling the Earth, bringing back amazing pictures. But in 1929, this was the telescope he was using at the Mount Wilson Observatory in Pasadena, California. Hubble's looking out at all these galaxies out there, and he's noticing that all of them are moving away from us. How does he know? There's a red shift in the light. If the galaxies were coming toward us, they would have been blue, but they're all moving away, red shift. So Hubble deduces, he said, well, here's the universe right now. Yesterday it was here, the day before that it was here, the day before that, you go all the way back to the very beginning. And the entire universe collapses back mathematically to nothing. Once there was nothing, and then the entire universe leapt into existence. So if time were reversed, the universe would collapse back to nothing. That has implications we'll talk about in a minute. Now in 1948, scientists thought, well, the universe did have a beginning, and it had a beginning in a big bang. There was a big heat explosion. And Sir Fred Hoyle, who was an atheist, didn't like the theory. He was a steady stater. What's a steady stater? Somebody who believes the universe is static and eternal, like Einstein was initially. He didn't want it to have a beginning. He wanted it to be eternal. And so when people started saying the universe had a beginning, and had a beginning in a great explosion, Hoyle said, what are you going to call it, the Big Bang? And they said, yeah. The name stuck. Just like today, you heard about the God particle? You know where that came from? Some guy in 1993 wrote a book called The God Particle. It has nothing to do with God. But the Higgs boson, they're calling the God particle. The name just stuck. So this Big Bang thing stuck, and scientists said, well, if it did have a beginning, a great explosion, there should be some heat out there, remnant heat still left over. But nobody bothered to look for it until two scientists working at Bell Labs in Homedale, New Jersey, discovered it by accident. This is Robert Wilson and Arno Penzias. That big antenna behind them is the antenna by which they discovered the radiation afterglow. That's literally the smoking gun to the Big Bang. The remnant heat is still out there. It's just a couple of degrees above absolute zero, but they found it. In fact, Robert Jastrow, an agnostic astronomer, right after this discovery said, this discovery has put the nail in the coffin of the last doubting Thomas, who believed in the steady state theory. He said, after this discovery, you can't believe in the steady state anymore. The universe had a beginning, it had a beginning, a great explosion. In fact, they won Nobel Prizes for this in 1978. Now, scientists thought there should be very fine temperature variations in that radiation afterglow that allowed the galaxies to form in the early universe. But they had no way of measuring these temperature variations from Earth. They were going to have to put a satellite up to do it. And in the 1980s, they had a satellite ready to go. This leads us to the G in Surge, the Great Galaxy Seeds. They were about to put it up on the space shuttle. But in 1986, the Challenger exploded off the launching pad. They had no way to get the satellite up, so they had to redesign it completely. And in 1989, they put it up on a rocket and launched it into orbit. And it circled the Earth for 3 years taking measurements. It was called COBE, for Cosmic Background Explorer. Finally, in 1992, they announced their results. They found temperature variations that were down to 1 part in 100,000. If those temperature variations weren't there, according to the theory, we wouldn't be here. There'd be no galaxies, there'd be no planets, nothing would have come together. In fact, the leader of the expedition, this man, George Smoot, who taught at UCal Berkeley, said, we found the machining marks of the Creator. He said, if you're religious, it's like looking at God. That was the headline in a May 1992 edition of Time magazine. If you're religious, it's like looking at God. Now, what does this say about Darwinism? Absolutely nothing. But I always hear atheists, or many atheists, saying, look, if Darwinism is true, there's no need for a creator. That's nonsense. Why? Because this is long before biology. You need a creator, a designer, it seems, from the very beginning. In other words, the Big Bang was not a chaotic explosion. It was a highly fine-tuned event, and it remains fine-tuned to this day. The expansion rate right now is highly fine-tuned. If it were any different, we wouldn't be here. We'll get to that argument in a minute. Now the E in surge stands for Einstein, Einstein's theory of general relativity. And Einstein knew back in 1916 that his general relativity equations showed beyond any doubt that the universe had a beginning, that time, space, and matter were correlative, that they came into existence together. But the great Einstein didn't like it. He called his theory irritating. Why? Because it implied there was a beginning, which implied there was a beginner. So you know what the great Einstein did in order to avoid the absolute beginning? The great Einstein divided by 0. Now, what are you told in 3rd grade? Never divide by 0. You can go straight to hell for that! Well, the great Einstein divides by 0. And then in the 1920s, mathematicians are looking at his equations going, Al, you seem to have a mathematical error in here. You can't divide by 0. Your original general relativity equations seem to be correct. Then in 1929, Hubble sees the expanding universe, the redshift and the light, from his telescope at Mount Wilson. He calls Einstein and he says, Al, Dr. Einstein, what you predicted in 1916 by general relativity, I'm witnessing through my telescope. You predicted an expanding universe. I can see it. Why don't you come out and see it for yourself? So in 1931, Einstein went out to Mount Wilson in Pasadena, California, and looked through Hubble's telescope. In fact, who's that right behind him? That's Hubble. You see the pipe? After he looks through the telescope, sometime later, he said, I now see the necessity of a beginning. The universe did have a beginning. All I'm interested now is to find the mind of God. The rest are details. Now, I hasten to add, Einstein was not a Christian. He denied being an atheist. He also denied being a pantheist. So nobody really knows what Einstein was. He may have been more like a deist. You know, like somebody believes that God started the universe and then left it. Maybe holds it together but doesn't intervene. But his theory, which has been proven accurate over and over again, shows that space, time, and matter had a beginning out of nothing. In fact, if Einstein were here today and you were to say, Al, I don't think the universe had a beginning, you know what he'd probably do? He'd probably do this. Because it did. Now, this evidence led this man, Robert Jastrow, an agnostic astronomer, who until he died about 6 years ago, sat in the same chair that Edwin Hubble sat in at the Mount Wilson Observatory in Pasadena, California. In 1978, he wrote a book called God and the Astronomers. He updated it in 1992. He goes through some of this surge evidence that had been discovered to that point. And on page 1 of the book, he says, I'm an agnostic on religious matters. In other words, he's saying, I don't know whether God exists or not. But here's what he says on page 14. He says, the astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world. The essential element in the astronomical and biblical accounts of Genesis is the same. He then goes on in an interview to say this. Oh, by the way, that's an actual picture from the Hubble Space Telescope. That's Saturn in infrared. It's not a painting. That's Saturn. Here's what Jastrow said in an interview. He said, astronomers now found they painted themselves into a corner because they have proven by their own methods that the world began abruptly, an act of creation to which you can trace the seeds of every star, every planet, every living thing in this cosmos and on the earth, and they have found that all this has happened as a product of forces they cannot hope to discover. That there are what I or anyone would call supernatural forces at work is now, I think, a scientifically proven fact. Wait. Why would it be scientifically proven that supernatural forces are at work? Why couldn't nature have created the universe? Because there was no nature. Nature was the effect. It can't be the cause. I was at the University of Michigan a couple years ago, and during the Q&A, an atheist said, hey Frank, this is a God of the gaps argument. Give science enough time and we'll find a cause for this. I said, no, John, you'll never find a cause for all of nature. He said, no, we will. I said, first of all, John, that sounds a lot like faith. But secondly, you'll never find a natural cause for all of nature. To say so would be like me saying, if you give me enough time, I'll figure out one day that I gave birth to my own mother. No, you can't in principle. If all nature had a beginning, then the cause can't be nature. What do we mean by nothing, by the way? We say the universe came into existence out of nothing. What is nothing? It's non-being. No space, no matter, no time. Aristotle had a good definition of nothing. He said, nothing is what rocks dream about. That's nothing. No space, no matter, no time. It wasn't just Jastrow who said these sort of things. Arno Penzias, the guy who discovered the radiation afterglow, won a Nobel Prize, said the best data we have concerning the Big Bang are exactly what I would have predicted had I had nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole. His colleague, Robert Wilson, said certainly there was something that set it all off. I can't think of a better theory of the origin of the universe to match Genesis. George Smoot, the man who said if you're religious, it's like looking at God, said there is no doubt that a parallel exists between the Big Bang as an event and the Christian notion of creation from nothing. Now there's one more line of evidence that I haven't spoken to you about the beginning of the universe. It's not scientific, it's philosophical. It's called the Kalam cosmological argument. And it says that the universe, or I should say time, must have had a beginning. Why? Because if time didn't have a beginning, today never would have gotten here. Now this can give you intellectual constipation unless you follow closely. All right, let's take a look at the timeline. Here's today, and let's say we don't know how far back it goes. Here's yesterday, here's the day before that, there's last week. If the past were infinite, today could not have arrived. Why? Because you can't traverse an infinite number of days. Nor can you add another day to an infinite timeline, can you? But once tomorrow comes, we're going to add another day, aren't we? So this is an inescapable argument, it seems to me, that time had a beginning. Now, if the universe had a beginning, then it must have had a beginner. The evidence leads us to one of the following 2 options. Either no one created something out of nothing, which is the atheistic view, or someone created something out of nothing, which is the theistic view. Now, my only question is, which view is more reasonable? That no one created something out of nothing, or that someone created something out of nothing? At Texas A&M, one gentleman stood up and said, I think no one created something out of nothing is more reasonable. I said, wait, hold on. Let's take a look at number 2 for a second. Number 2 says, someone created something out of nothing. Now that's a miracle, right? You got a creation out of nothing, but at least you got a miracle worker. You got someone, no one, creating a miracle or doing a miracle seems completely absurd. Now you can ask who made the someone if you want, but to say that no one created something out of nothing, that seems completely absurd. And if you want to say that things can pop into existence without a cause, like the universe can pop into existence without a cause, then why doesn't everything pop into existence without a cause? Why don't Mercedes-Benzes and MacBook Pros pop into existence without a cause? It'd save me a couple $1,000 here if it would, right? In fact, the law of causality does not say that everything has a cause. What does the law of causality say? It says that everything that comes to be has a cause. There has to be something that is the uncaused first cause. But everything after that, if it comes to be, it has to have a cause. In fact, I told the audience at A&M that night, I said, to show you how seriously everyone in this room takes the law of causality, that everything that comes to be has a cause. There is no one in this room right now that as you sit here, you are currently concerned that a hippopotamus has appeared out of nothing in your room and is currently defecating on the carpet, right? You don't worry about such things. Why? Because you know that things don't pop into existence without a cause. As you sit here right now, you're not worried that a raging Bengal tiger is going to appear right here and devour someone on this aisle, right? You don't worry about that. If we want to doubt the law of causality, guess what? We've got to do away with all science, because that's what science is. It's a search for causes. In fact, a good question to ask atheists is, if there is no God, why is there something rather than nothing at all? Why is there something rather than nothing at all? This was Leibniz's question. Why is there something rather than nothing at all? The atheist says, well, the universe has always been here, therefore it doesn't need cause. The evidence seems to indicate it hasn't always been here. So something beyond the universe, something that's spaceless, timeless, and immaterial must be the cause. I already mentioned it's not a God of the gaps argument. You might say, well, wait, how do atheists respond to this evidence? One of the prevailing views right now is the multi-universe theory, which does not rescue the problem, or does not solve the problem, but it does lead to some funny drawings, okay? This is National Geographic pointing out how the multi-universe theory works. Check this out. Here's what they said. Self-generating universes, multiple universes grow like branches from a tree trunk in a model that allows the universe to create itself. Hello, McFly. Can you create yourself? I don't know about you, but I'm not going to let some graphic artist down at National Geographic draw some sort of demented French horn to get me to believe that's how we got here. One scientist in the article was very honest. He said, it's sort of like we're brushing our ignorance under the rug of the very early universe. Which leads us to conclude with this man, Robert Jastrow, again, the agnostic astronomer who followed Hubble at the Mount Wilson Observatory and wrote the book God and the Astronomers. After he goes through all this evidence to show that the universe had a beginning, here's how he ends the book. This is worth the price of the book. He says, for the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he's greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. No doubt reading Genesis 1:1. No, I don't see any good reason why we ought not be teaching this surge evidence in our public school system. You notice I didn't say anything about this is what the Bible says. I said, oh, this is congruent with what the Bible says, but you don't need the Bible to know this. This is just evidence. Now, the next two arguments won't take as long, but let's go through them. The key argument is the cosmological argument, followed by the design argument or teleological argument, and this is the old William Paley watch argument. If you found this watch in the woods, would you think it was made by natural law? Let's suppose you find a diamond-studded Rolex in the woods, you pick it up and you go, I don't need to turn this in, this was made by the wind and the rain. You say, no, every watch implies a watchmaker. Well, it turns out that both the universe and life are a lot more designed than a watch. And we're going to look at the universe first. Why? Because we just got done talking about how it exploded into being out of nothing. Well, it turns out it didn't just explode into being out of nothing. It did so with extreme precision. This is called the fine-tuning of the universe, sometimes called the anthropic principle. What's the anthropic principle? Anthropos, another Greek word meaning mankind. That the universe appears to be highly fine-tuned for human life to exist here on Earth. In fact, for life to exist at all. And we'll start with Stephen Hawking, who put it this way. He said if the expansion rate of the universe was different by 1 part in 1,000 million, a second after the Big Bang, the universe would have collapsed back on itself and never developed galaxies. If you change the expansion rate that infinitesimal amount, we are not here. It's not just, by the way, the expansion rate. It's also the gravitational force right now, which is fine-tuned to 1 in 10 to the 40. You go, well, what does that mean, 1 in 10 to the 40? That's 1 part in 1 with 40 zeros following it. That's extreme precision. You say, I can't get my head around it. Yeah, neither can I. Let me give you an illustration. Take a tape measure and stretch it across the entire known universe. By the way, that's a long way. Okay? Set the gravitational force at a particular inch mark on that tape measure. I know gravity's not measured in inches. This is just to give you a relative idea of scale in your mind. If you were to move the strength of gravity 1 inch in either direction, we wouldn't be here. Across that entire scale. There's only 3 possible explanations for that value being right there. Number 1, physical necessity. It had to be right there. Turns out, it doesn't have to be right there. It could be here, it could be way over there, it could be 1,000 miles that way. Second reason, chance. Which isn't a reason at all. It just means we don't know how it got there. I don't have enough faith to believe that. Third reason or possibility, design. Somebody put it right there. That seems to make the most sense to me. Once again, science doesn't say anything, scientists do. You've got to evaluate this evidence for yourself, right? There's even a habitability argument with regard to our solar system. Where are we in the solar system? Anyone know? There we are, third rock from the sun. If we were just a little bit closer to or a little bit further away, we wouldn't be here. A little bit closer to, we'd burn up. A little bit further away, we'd freeze. We are what scientists call the Goldilocks zone. It is not too hot. It is not too cold. It is just right, although not here in the winter. The axial tilt, 23.5 degrees. Change that slightly, we don't exist. Earth rotation, 24 hours. Change that slightly, we don't exist. The size and distance of the moon from us, change that slightly, we don't exist. If Jupiter was not in its current orbit, we wouldn't be here. Why not? What does Jupiter do for us? Yeah, asteroids. Jupiter is a cosmic vacuum cleaner. It attracts most of the meteors and space junk to it rather than us. And Saturn does the same thing. In fact, if you were to take a close-up look at Jupiter, you know what those purple marks are right there? Those are comet fragment strikes that are bigger than the Earth. Thank God for Jupiter. If Jupiter wasn't there, we wouldn't be here. In fact, I saw in the Drudge Report about 6 months ago, scientists say, big meteor may hit Earth 2040. I am rooting for Jupiter. In fact, want to see the size of Jupiter? Jupiter, check this out. There's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Earth. Look at poor Pluto down here. You know, Pluto recently has been demoted as a planet. I don't know about you, but I think it's size discrimination. Take a look at this. Sun, Jupiter, Earth. You can hardly see poor Pluto. Oh yeah, keep an eye on this. How about this now? Where's the Sun? There's the Sun over there. That's Jupiter. It's about 1 pixel in size on this scale. Earth is invisible. Pluto, forget about it. This is Arcturus. This is just another star in our galaxy. This isn't even out of our galaxy. This is in our galaxy. Okay, keep an eye on Arcturus. You got Arcturus there? Check this out. Where's Arcturus? Right there, to the left of the white star Rigel. Betelgeuse, right here. Antares. The Sun is 1 pixel. Jupiter is invisible at this scale. Earth, Pluto, forget about it. By the way, if you were to make Earth the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse would be 5 or 6 Empire State Buildings high. The heavens are awesome. This is just in our galaxy. In fact, another anthropic principle, the average distance between stars in our galaxy is 30 trillion miles. All that distance is necessary for us to exist here on Earth. Now, 30 trillion miles, how far is that? Far. Take you at least 2 tanks of gas in a Toyota Prius to go 30 trillion miles. That is, if the gas pedal doesn't stick. I was out at the Desert Museum a number of years ago in Tucson, Arizona. If you've ever been out to the Desert Museum in Tucson, it's far from the city lights. We were out there one night, and it was a beautiful, clear night. We could see satellites in orbit. It was so clear. And the guide said, it's so clear tonight that if we look up at 9:03, we're going to see the space shuttle in orbit. I said, oh, come on, we're not going to see the space shuttle in orbit. It's only 120 feet long. It's 350 miles up. We're not going to see it. Oh, me a little figure. At 9:03, the guy goes, look! We look up in the sky, about 70 degrees above the horizon, there's an object coming out of the west, streaking across the sky, relative to us, about like this. I mean, it is really cooking. When it got right about here, it disappeared. I don't know whether Scotty beamed it up or what. Actually, what was probably happening was, although it was night where we are, the sun was reflecting off of it, and when it got out of the sun range, we couldn't see it anymore. Now, when the space shuttle was in orbit, the space shuttle was traveling at about 18,000 miles an hour. It goes around the Earth once every hour and 15 minutes. 18,000 miles an hour is 5 miles per second. You got trouble getting to school in the morning? Take the space shuttle. 5 miles a second. Think about that. Well, I did a little calculation to try and figure out how long would it take us if we could get in the space shuttle and go 5 miles a second from our star to another star in our galaxy, an average distance away, 30 trillion miles. How long do you think it would take us? It would take us 201,450 years. That means if you got into the space shuttle at the time of Christ and started traveling to another star in our galaxy, an average distance away, you'd be less than 1/100th of the way there right now. The heavens are awesome. And how many stars are out there? According to scientists, the number of stars that are out there are about equivalent to the number of grains of sand on all the beaches on all the Earth. And to go from one star to another star going 5 miles a second will take you over 200,000 years. And we're going to explore space. No, we're not. We're not going anywhere in space. Who'd like to go to the next nearest star? We'll go. Get in, kids. We're almost there yet, Dad. Another 200,000 years. Play some more Xbox. In fact, take a look at this. You see this picture here on the left? That's from the ground. You see that square right there in the middle? That's this from the Hubble Space Telescope. Those are galaxies, stars, heavenly bodies. February 1st, 2003, so it's 10 years now. President Bush goes into the East Room of the White House at 9 in the morning on a Saturday. They turn the TV camera on. Every major network carries his address. Saturday morning, 9:03, why? The president looks in the camera and said, "My fellow Americans, this morning, our country experienced a great tragedy. Upon re-entry into the atmosphere, the space shuttle Columbia burned up in the skies over Texas. There are no survivors. The Columbia is lost." The president then went on to quote from Isaiah chapter 40, beginning in verse 25. Why Isaiah chapter 40? Because in Isaiah, according to Isaiah, God is speaking. What does God say? "To whom will you compare me, or who is my equal, says the Holy One." In other words, you want to know what I'm like? Here's what God says. "Lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these stars and named them one by one? Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing." The president went back in the camera and said, "The same God that created and named all those stars is the same God that created and knows the names of the 7 astronauts who perished today. While they did not return safely home to us, we can all now pray that they've returned safely home." Want to know who God is? Most Christians have the wrong idea of who God is. We think God is like a big angel. God is not a big angel. Want to know what God is? Remove all limits from your mind. That's God. If he's an ounce of any attribute, he's infinite in that attribute. Ounce of love, infinite love. Ounce of justice, infinite justice. Ounce of knowledge, infinite knowledge. He is the unchangeable standard by which everything else is measured. Why is there a second commandment? Thou shalt make no graven image. At least one reason why is there a second commandment. Because any image you make of a infinite being necessarily limits his majesty. You can't draw a picture of infinity. You're limiting his majesty. That's why the Bible says the heavens declare the glory of God. Psalm 103 verse 11 says, "God's love to those that fear him exceeds the height of the heavens above the earth." How high are the heavens above the earth? Stars equivalent to grains of sand on all the beaches on all the earth. 200,000 years at 5 miles a second between those stars. From our perspective, infinite. That's the point. Not only can you get a sense of the design and majesty of the Creator by looking into the universe, you can also look into a microscope and look into life. Let's take a quick look at this. You see this? This is an amoeba. Something the Darwinists say we all evolved from, or something like it. From the goo to you via the zoo, this is the goo. Now, here's an important observation. It doesn't say made by God or made by natural forces on it, does it? So you have to look at the data and interpret it. And in Darwin's day, this was not considered to be any big deal. That maybe non-living chemicals could come together through natural means, create an amoeba, and from that point, natural selection could take over, and billions of years later, here we are. Today we know, however, that a cell is not quite so simple. And in order to show you what I mean by that, I need to take you to your breakfast table. How many people here like alphabet cereal? Anyone like alphabet cereal? All right, let's suppose you want to have a bowl of alphabet cereal. And you come downstairs one morning to have a bowl of alphabet cereal, and you see the cereal's knocked over on the table, and right in the middle of the table, the letters spell, "Take out the garbage, Mom." What are you going to assume? The cat knocked the box over? Earthquake shook the house? No, you're going to say that that's intelligent design from an intelligent being. Mom. Or you're walking along the beach and you see in the sand, "John loves Mary." What do you assume? The crabs came out of the water and did that? The waves made... No, you're going to say John or Mary, that there's an intelligent being involved. Well, if simple messages like that require an intelligent being, then what about this message? DNA. The 4-letter genetic alphabet that all living things have. You have DNA, I have DNA, a banana has DNA. And the human genome is 3 billion letters long, all in the right order. How did they get that way? In fact, it's a code. That's exactly what Bill Gates said, who, as you know, is no Christian. He said DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software ever created. You say, well, mutations can do the job. First of all, you need a code to begin with to mutate. But then secondly, do you think if you just started mutating Microsoft Word it would work real well? It doesn't work very well now. So the point here is take out the garbage mom requires a intelligent mind. What about DNA? It's the same kind of thing. In fact, how much DNA is in an amoeba? The amount of DNA in a one-celled amoeba is about equivalent to 1,000 volumes of an encyclopedia. An amoeba, you could line several hundred up in an inch. It's a microscopic organism, and in each one of them, you've got 1,000 volumes worth of information. It seems that the first life requires an intelligent cause. You say, wait, who told you this? How do you even know that there's this much information in an amoeba? You're not a PhD in biology. No, I'm not, but I know who is. Richard Dawkins. Even he admits this, that there's that much information in an amoeba. You say, wait, Frank, this is a God of the gaps argument. We're going to find a natural cause for this one day. Well, we can keep looking, that's fine, but it's not a God of the gaps argument. Why? Because we're not arguing from what we don't know, we're arguing from what we do know. What do I mean by that? When you see take out the garbage mom, it's not just that you lack a natural explanation for that. It's that take out the garbage mom is positive, empirically verifiable evidence for an intelligent being. Mom. And when you see DNA, that should tell you there's an intelligent being out there. One last thing before we get to the moral argument and take your questions. Let's talk about you in the beginning. In fact, we were all here at one point. This is in the womb at 11 weeks. Question, is that animal, mineral, vegetable, or human? Looks human, doesn't it? In fact, let's go back to the very beginning. Let's go back to when your mother and your father got together. Have you guys had this talk before? I see some young people in here, so I'll try and be discreet. When your mother and your father got together, your father sent the entire population of the United States, 300 million soldiers, toward your mother's egg. And then there was a race. And you won! Don't let anyone ever tell you you're not special. You beat out 300 million others. You have blown away anything Michael Phelps has done. Now, seeing some of you limp in here earlier makes it hard for me to believe you were the fastest soldier in the G pool, but you were. Now, your soldier was 20 to 30 times smaller than a grain of salt, yet it contained half of the genetic information that makes you you. And your mother's egg was about the size of a period at the end of a sentence in an average book, and that contained the other half of the genetic information that makes you you. And when your soldier and your egg came together, a new 100% genetic human being was created. You have not received any more genetic information from that point till right now. It's just multiplied, duplicated itself. In fact, there's only 4 things separating you, that unborn child, from adulthood. Time, air, water, and food. Those are the same 4 things that separate a 2-year-old from adulthood. Does this have implications on the abortion issue? Yeah, I think it does. We don't kill the 2-year-old. Why do we kill the unborn child in the womb? It's the same genetically. Now, from that point till right now, a construction project of astonishing complexity began taking place. Cells began multiplying at a rate of 4,000 cells per second. Brain cells began multiplying at a rate of 100,000 cells per second. Thank you, sir. At least for most of you, anyway. How did they, some cells became lung cells, other cells became heart cells, other cells became kidney cells. How do they know how to do this? Nobody knows. Some cells went so far across you to become what they needed to become that it would be equivalent to you today walking across the United States alone. And that construction project continues to this day. You just made 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. Knock it off! How do you know how to do this? I don't have enough faith to believe there's not intelligence behind this. There's intelligence behind you, behind life itself. All right, so we've been through the cosmological, teleological, Now let's take a brief look at the moral argument, wrap this up, and get to your questions. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to do a tour across Europe. Started in England, wound up in Berlin, went to all the hot spots like Normandy, wound up in Berlin, but on the way stopped at the Buchenwald concentration camp in Weimar, Germany. In April of 1945, the Allies liberated the camp. They went through the front gate, which is still there. They looked to the right. They saw the crematorium, which is still there. They got down to the crematorium. They looked into the courtyard attached to the crematorium, and this is what they saw. Brace yourself. If there is no God, this is just a matter of opinion. Oh, this is an emotional argument. Yeah, partially it is. But you know what? Sometimes your emotions tell you the truth. We all know this is really wrong. It's not just a matter of opinion. It's not just your opinion against Hitler's opinion. This is objectively morally wrong. If that's the case, there must be a moral law here. In fact, how can you discover who's right and who's wrong? Mother Teresa, the Catholic nun who served the poor her whole life in Calcutta, India, or Hitler? How do you know who's better here? How can you discover? Let me ask you a question this way. Which map of Scotland is better? What would you need to see in order to know which map is better? You would need to see a real unchanging place called Scotland, right? I mean, if Scotland doesn't exist, these two maps are meaningless. But if the real Scotland exists, then you can compare these two maps, and you can see map A, while it's not perfect, is a better representation of the real Scotland than is map B. In other words, you have something to measure these two maps by. Well, that's exactly what we do when we compare Mother Teresa and Hitler. Mother Teresa wasn't the standard, Hitler wasn't the standard, there's a standard beyond both of them by which we measure both of them. And that standard is God's unchanging very nature. We say Mother Teresa measured up to the standard better than did Hitler. Look, if there is no God, then the Nazis were not really wrong. I was at Michigan State a couple of years ago, and during the Q&A, I was talking to a couple atheists. They were sitting right over here. We got talking about standards for morality, and I said to one of them, I said, well, you're an atheist. What's your standard for morality? And he said, whatever the majority decides to do is morally right. I said, are you telling me that if you lived in Nazi Germany and you decided that murdering Jews was morally right, that that would be morally right? And he paused, he blushed, and he said, yes. And his atheist buddy sitting right next to him looked at him and yelled, no! The first kid knew in his heart the answer was no, but in order to be consistent with his atheism, he had to say yes. Of course, on atheism, why does the majority get to decide? There is no morality, objective morality. It's all subjective. Who said the majority gets to decide? If there is no God, love is no better than rape. Not in any objective way. Freedom is no better than slavery. Religious crusades are not wrong. I've had the opportunity to debate the late Christopher Hitchens a couple of times, who I love, by the way. Christopher Hitchens was just a fun guy. And everything he said sounded so good because he had the British accent, and he was very witty. But he was, in his book, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything, he kept talking about how religious people had done evil things, which is true. But if there's no God, there's nothing wrong with anything. You can't blame religious people for conducting the Crusades. Why? Because there's no God. That's just your opinion. There's nothing really wrong. In fact, tolerance is no better than intolerance if there is no God. And you can't complain about the problem of evil. Why can't you complain about the problem of evil? Because if there's no God, there's no evil. Because there's no way to even detect evil. You say, how so? Because evil doesn't exist on its own. Evil is a privation in good. In fact, C.S. Lewis for many years thought, there can't be a good God because there's too much injustice in the world. And then Lewis had an epiphany. He became a theist and then later a Christian, and he wrote Mere Christianity this. He said, as an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? Exactly. You can't know injustice or injustice unless you know justice. You can't know evil unless you know good. There would be no such thing as evil unless good existed. So evil does not disprove God. Evil may prove there's a devil out there, but it doesn't disprove God. Why? Because there would be no such thing as evil unless there was good. There would be no such thing as good unless there was God. You could say it this way. The shadows prove the sunshine. In order to have shadows, you have to have sunshine. In order to have evil, you have to have good. Oh, you can have good without evil. You can have sunshine without shadows, but you can't have shadows without sunshine. So evil does not disprove God. Again, it may prove there's a devil, but it doesn't disprove God. Let me be very clear of what we are saying and what we're not saying. We are not saying that atheists can't be moral. They can. Many atheists are very moral people. We are not saying atheists don't know morality. They do. In my 2 debates with Hitchens, I had to keep saying, Christopher, I'm not saying you're a bad guy. That's not the point. I'm not saying you don't know morality. You do know it. That's not my point. By the way, you can see both of these debates on our website for free. They're up there. Here's what we are saying, however, that atheists can't justify morality. They can theorize about how we know murder is wrong, whether it's evolution or society or whatever they want to say, but atheism provides no immaterial objective standard that establishes why murder is wrong. On atheism, why is murder wrong? Why? This is the difference, by the way, between epistemology and ontology. I know big words for late at night, but epistemology is how you know something, and ontology is that something exists. And what tends to occur in this discussion on this topic is people tend to conflate those two things. They say, well, I know morality, so it exists. No, just because you know right from wrong doesn't mean there's a standard of right and wrong outside of you unless a standard giver is there. In fact, I learned the times tables from my 4th grade teacher, Mr. Fisher. He taught them to me. That's epistemology. That's how I know them. But the times tables existed prior to me or Mr. Fisher ever existing. That's ontology. Just because I came to learn about the times tables by my 4th grade teacher doesn't explain why the times tables are what they are. Similarly, you may learn morality in a whole bunch of different ways, but how do you explain that certain things are really right and other things are really wrong unless something grounds it? A moral agent. An immaterial objective standard of justice requires a theistic God. This is a picture of Christopher in our 2nd debate at the College of New Jersey. That's his book, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. And by the way, this word poison, it's a very fun way of saying what? That religion is evil. But again, there's no way to detect evil, or evil can't exist unless good exists. So he's actually borrowing from God in order to argue against him. And it's wrong to steal it. He's stealing from God in order to argue against him. And by the way, religion does not poison everything. Everything poisons religion. I poison religion. Why? Because I can't live up to the pure words of Christ. In fact, in the 2nd debate, I said, Christopher, I'm a hypocrite. I can't live up to this book. But if I could, I wouldn't need a Savior. If I was perfect, I wouldn't need Christ. But I'm not. And when people tell me, gee, I can't go to church anymore because there's too many hypocrites down there, I always say, come on down, pal. We got room for one more. See, that's what the church is. It's a hospital for sinners. It's not a country club for saints. We're all sinners. We're all fallen. That's why we need a Savior. In fact, if you're not a hypocrite, your standards are too low. You may want to raise your standards up a little bit. All right, let's summarize this whole thing. Remember I said in the beginning, from these 3 arguments, we're going to come up with a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator. These are the 3 arguments we've used, so let's unpack them. From the cosmological argument, we can see that the being that created the universe is immaterial, timeless, and spaceless. Why? Because he created material, time, and space. We can't be made of material, time, and space. Secondly, he's also extremely powerful because he created out of nothing. You realize everything we create out of pre-existing material? God creates out of nothing. What rocks dream about, nothing. Also, from the teleological argument, we can see he's extremely intelligent. In other words, this being put this universe together with extreme precision, which means we have purpose, we're here for a reason. From the moral argument, we can see he's absolutely morally perfect, and he's also personal. Why? How do we know he's personal from the moral argument? Because you only have a moral obligation to persons. You don't have a moral obligation to impersonal forces. When you go try and dunk a basketball, you're not sinning against the law of gravity. Okay, you only sin against persons. We also know he's personal from the cosmological argument. How so? Because to go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone had to make a choice, and only persons make choices. A force like gravity, which by the way was created, doesn't really choose to do anything. Gravity doesn't decide, look, if Turek drops that remote one more time, I'm not going to pull it to the ground, right? It just keeps doing the same thing over and over again. But to go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone had to make a choice. Now notice, you've got an immaterial, timeless, spaceless, extremely powerful, extremely intelligent, purposeful, morally perfect, personal creator. This is the God of biblical Christianity identified without reference to the Bible. We have the God of the Bible, but we haven't even opened the Bible yet, other than to say this is congruent with the Bible. Now, does this mean Christianity is true? No, there's a lot more that we have to look at, like Jesus and miracles and all that. All we can say now is if our reasoning is good to this point, if theism is true, it appears that atheism and pantheism are not. Law of non-contradiction. Well, if that's the case, one of these theisms could be true, or maybe another theism we don't know about, right? Or maybe they just have theism right but nothing else. Maybe everything else about them is wrong. That's possible too. But none of these world religions could be true. Why? Because all of these world religions are non-theistic. Now, I am not saying, hear me out here, I'm not saying everything taught by the religions on the right is wrong. That's not my point. My point is, if our reasoning is good to this point, when it comes to the existence and nature of God, these worldviews or these religions appear to have it wrong. They may have other things right, but when it comes to the existence and nature of a theistic God, they appear to have it wrong. So, which one of these is true? Well, if there is a God and he wanted to tell us which one of these is true, what could he do? He could do something only he could do, and that would be a miracle, point 3. But we don't have time to get into that now, with the exception of saying one thing. A lot of people have trouble with miracles, like resurrections and Jonah. You know, how can that be true? Please! Or Noah. That's outrageous. Let me ask you guys a question. What is the greatest miracle in the Bible? People normally say the resurrection. It's a big one, but no, it's a sissy miracle compared to the greatest miracle. Oh, he's dissing the resurrection here. That's not good. What is the greatest miracle in the Bible? Immaculate Conception is easy.
Creation.
Yes, the greatest miracle in the Bible. Brandon back there? Yeah, he's one of the organizers. Thanks a lot. Cheater. Anyway. The greatest miracle in the Bible is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that verse is true, every other verse is at least possible. Well, we've just given evidence that it appears the first verse is indeed true. That in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That space, time, and matter came into existence out of nothing. If that's true, then maybe the other verses are true as well. The other miracles are. People always go, Cal, how can you believe in Jonah? Jonah's easy for a God to create the universe out of nothing. If God created the universe out of nothing, he keep Jonah alive in a fish for 3 days. Can he part the Red Sea? Can he raise somebody from the dead? Of course, if he can create the whole universe out of nothing. That's easy. Now, some of you are going, you just said something I don't agree with. Like what? You just said that God can do whatever he wants. It's not logically impossible. I thought God can do anything. No, there's even some things God can't do. Like what? Like he can't do logically impossible things. Like what? Like, well, he can't create a square circle. No such thing. Can't create a married bachelor. No such thing. Can't create a one-ended stick. No such thing. Can't create an honest politician. There's some things that are just too hard for God. Alright? Anyway, so miracles are possible. The only question is, have other miracles occurred since then? But we don't have time to get into that now, but we've got to end where we began. Remember our friend Francis Crick? His astonishing hypothesis? He said that you, your joys, your sorrows, your memories, your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nervous cells and their associated molecules. This is materialism. This is materialistic atheism. You don't have free will. You're not really reasoning. It's all an illusion. Imagine, however, if Crick had written this in his book. The astonishing hypothesis is that my scientific conclusions that I write in this book are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. Would anybody read the book? No. Can everyone see this is self-defeating? Just apply the Roadrunner tactic to this. If all of our thoughts are a product of previous natural causes over which we have no control, then why should we believe the thoughts that Crick puts in his book? We shouldn't. We shouldn't believe anything. Atheism, at the end of the day, is ultimately self-defeating. In fact, let me put it this way. I am more sure atheism is false than I am that Christianity is true. Because you wouldn't even be able to reason if atheism is true. And we're doing that right now. So, what's the purpose of your life? Is it a glorified Monopoly game? Nope. But next time we'll talk about the purpose of life. So maybe we'll do part 2 next semester perhaps. Remember about the book, the DVDs, the curriculum. There's our website, crossexamined.org. And by the way, where are those cards, those bookmarks? Are they in the back there? If you want to join our email list, we only send 1 email a month. It's got an apologetic little article in there that'll help you. There's a card back there, back there on the table somewhere. It's a little bookmark. Just fill it out and give us your email address. We keep the bookmark, and we don't give your email address to anyone else. We just keep it ourselves. We're on, obviously, we email, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. In fact, we are so into social media now, we have created a complete conglomeration of YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. We put them all together. It's called UTwitface. You may want to join that with us. We're on radio every Saturday morning, 10 a.m., that's Eastern Time, and DirecTV Wednesday at 9 p.m. and 1 a.m., that's Eastern Time again, and also Saturday at 10. And we're going to go to questions here in just a minute, but Steve has a couple of things to say before we go to questions, so give it up for Steve today.
Yeah, so, as Steve stated, what we're going to do right now is transition into a short time to fill out comment cards on the night. So if you want to look down underneath your seat, there's going to be a white basket with cards and some pencils. There might not be enough pencils, so just share those. And if your row doesn't have a basket, the row in front of you should pass back to you. But what we want from this is for you guys to go through, and we want your honest opinions, what you guys thought of this night. I know my mind is racing. There's been a lot of material that has been covered. But we want to hear how you're processing through that. What are some things that are going through in your mind? Those might include maybe advice, other events that you want us to host, things that you're held up on or just want to hear more about. About midway down the page, there's also some options here which you can put a checkbox next to or circle. One of those, the top one, I just want to add a little bit of clarification too. And it says that I made a decision tonight. And what that means is, if you're sitting here tonight and you've heard all this evidence and you're sitting here and you're like, man, there has to be a God. If that's something that you believe that there is a God, and you've chosen to believe in that God. If that's something that you have made that decision, we ask you to put a checkbox or check mark next to that. The rest of these, we would love to get in contact with you, talk more, process through this with you guys. So feel free to put that down there if you do want more information from us. Also, when you leave, we'll be handing out flyers to Prime Time. Once again, that's our weekly meeting, which is in 3650 Humanities, every Thursday night at 9 p.m. So I'm going to get off here now, and we're going to transition into the question and answer time. If you guys have to get going, feel free to leave whenever. We're going to go until the question stops. So, back to Frank.
All right, thank you. And we got a mic right here. This is such a big room. Please come up to this mic, and that way everyone can hear the question, and I don't have to repeat the question. And that would work out great if you could do that. No one likes to ask the first question, so we're moving right on to the second question. Yes, sir. Second question. Yes, sir.
Both a remark and a question.
Yes, sir.
The remark is that my mind,
Let me just move this down just a little bit. Yes, sir.
remark is there in my mind. Truth and the Bible are both unreliable because just like science, they both be interpreted and translated, and you can see what's come with that. And as far as the Bible is concerned, translation or interpretation. The question is,
Let me just mention one thing about that. Yes, it's true that all data needs to be interpreted interpreted. But if I were to say to you, so you're saying that the Bible doesn't need to be interpreted, you would say what?
It doesn't need to be?
Yeah.
It does.
Okay, so you're disagreeing with me, right?
No. I'm saying that they all need to be interpreted.
That's right. But I can clearly understand what you're saying, right? You're saying that the Bible needs to be interpreted, right? And I can understand what you mean by that, right? So why can I understand what you mean, but then you're saying that when we look at the Bible, we can't understand what it means?
I'm not saying we can't understand what it means.
Oh, okay, well, it's true.
I'm saying it's open to different interpretation.
Oh, it is, but...
As is truth, as is science.
But, let me put it another way. Is your statement right there open to different interpretations? It is. Well, then if it is, then you really said nothing, because if you say all statements need to be interpreted, and I say no, statements don't need to be interpreted, and then you say yes, they do, you're disagreeing with me because you think I'm misinterpreting what you're saying.
Let me get to the question.
Okay, yes, sir.
If your definition of God is to remove all limitations, essentially, what's the difference between that and pantheism?
Well, a pantheistic God is a limited God. It's as big as the universe. It just is the universe. It's made of material. It's made of whatever is the universe. But a theistic God is beyond the universe. And when we mean by infinite, we don't mean that he is space, but he's present to space. He holds space together. But he's not, God isn't me or God isn't you, but he's holding us together. He's the force that holds us together. So a pantheist thinks that everything is God, everything that exists in the finite world. But a theist says, no, God created the finite world and has infinite power and all these other infinite attributes, but he's not the finite world.
If you can demonstrate that every material thing, when you get it down to its smallest quantity, is ultimately spiritual and not material, doesn't that mean that even a pantheistic God is all immaterial and thus spiritual?
But a pantheistic God has no person. It's not a force that makes choices.
Then you're putting a limitation on it.
I'm sorry?
You're putting a limitation on it,
On what?
on a pantheistic God.
Well, I am, because a pantheistic God by definition is not infinite. That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, sir.
Have you read Lawrence Krauss's latest book, A Universe from Nothing?
No, I've read several reviews of Lawrence Krauss's book, one by Ed Fazer, who teaches at Pasadena City College, one by William Lane Craig, and I saw Craig's debate with Krauss. And the basic problem that Krauss has is he equivocates on what the word nothing is. And even he admits that when he talks about nothing, he's not talking about non-being. He's still talking about something, be it quantum vacuum or whatever he wants to say. So the evidence from cosmology seems to point to a beginning of all of the created order from non-being, not from a quantum vacuum or positive and negative energy, as Isaac Asimov would say, but literally no thing.
By nothing, do you mean no mass, no energy, no physical laws as we know it?
Non-being. Whatever that entails. Which is nothing. No thing, non-existence.
Well, according to Lawrence Krauss, he states that nothingness is inherently unstable.
Okay, stop right there. I understand the quote. He said nothing is inherently unstable. Think about it this way. He's saying that no thing has a characteristic. Well, no thing can't have a characteristic. That's why he's equivocating on the word nothing. He doesn't mean literally no thing. He means something, be it the quantum vacuum, but not no thing.
Okay, so what you're saying is mass and energy and all those things can be formed from nothing, as nothing would be defined as quantum fluctuations. That's what Lawrence Krauss's theory or argument is. He says that these things can come from absolutely nothing if you define nothing as a state which can be affected by quantum fluctuations. Now, if there have been claims on a previous form of nothing, why should we believe that this nothing that Lawrence Krauss gives, why should we believe that this nothing is caused by divine intervention, when every single perspective of nothing that we've had thus far has been found by something else, just a little less nothing.
Well,
I'm sorry.
There's no in between. This is called logic, the law of the excluded middle. Either it exists or it doesn't exist. There's no it quasi-exists. It either exists or it doesn't exist. So Krauss is talking about the quantum vacuum, quantum uncausality. But a quantum vacuum is something. It's a sea of fluctuating energy. It's not no thing. The evidence points to the fact that no thing came, or that the beginning was a beginning from no thing, not a quantum vacuum, because a quantum vacuum would need a cause. In fact, let me just go through a few of these points here. Subatomic particles, even in the quantum vacuum, did not come into being out of nothing, non-being. The subatomic vacuum is comprised of fluctuating energy. The question is, what caused the vacuum? Secondly, this is very speculative because there are at least 10 different interpretations of quantum mechanics. Some are deterministic, some are not. According to atheist Victor Stenger, there's no consensus as to which is the right one. And this may be an issue of unpredictability rather than uncausality. For example, if you take a photon of light and put it off, say, this computer, well, the photon isn't going to affect the movement of this computer. But if you take a photon of light and you put it on a subatomic particle that's smaller than the photon, that might cause the photon to act unpredictably. That's why when we try and look into the quantum realm, we can't predict where the particles are going to be because our very act of observing the quantum realm disturbs the quantum realm. So this is a very speculative area. And again, he's not talking about no thing, non-being. He's talking about something which needs a cause.
He also argues that, one of the original definitions of nothing would have been the formation of the earth and of people. But since then we've come up with scientific theories for that and whatnot. And once that was made, then we probably had some definition of nothing of before the earth. And then after that we had a definition of, before the earth there was space, and that must have been nothing. And before space we must have said Big Bang, without mass, without energy, without time. But Lawrence Krauss still goes a step further and he finds the cause of this. And at every step of the way before that, Christianity has claimed to be the cause of that. Why should we believe Christianity is the cause of this time?
Well, I'm not saying Christianity necessarily is. What I'm saying is that the heart of reality is a metaphysical entity, something beyond the physical. And the nothingness, again, that Krauss is talking about is not what the Big Bang cosmology points to. The Big Bang cosmology points to literal non-being, no space, no time, no matter. A quantum vacuum is something. It's not non-being. Now, I could direct you to many reviews of Krauss's book, even by atheists who say this is equivocation. For example, there's an atheist from Columbia University who wrote in the New York Times a review of Krauss's book and said this is pop psychology, or I should say pop metaphysics. He's not really understanding what the word nothing means.
I'm aware of that, but religion has tried to explain every definition of nothing before this current definition.
Well, that might all be true, but that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about here. We could talk all day. We got a big line. Let me go to the next guy, and we can talk more later. I'll stay on. Okay. Okay. What's that?
I have to leave.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hello, Dr. Turek. Thank you for coming, and also thanks for serving in the Navy, whether or not you're doing it. And as a quick aside, you mentioned that God can't create to marry naturally, but I argue that's immoral.
That's some more.
Yeah.
Okay.
To my question, it seems like you just discounted the infinite regression completely. Your argument. If you go back to the slide, you talk about does God exist, and you break it down to 3 different categories.
I'm sorry, say it again?
You break, does God exist down to the 3 arguments, and...
Oh yeah, okay. From
I don't know if you can go back.
cosmological, teleological, moral, okay.
Right,
yeah.
so cosmological, you say since there has to be, the universe was created, therefore there was a God.
There was a creator.
There was a creator, but who created the creator? You're saying, well, you can just discount the progression.
Well, no. Well, it's a good question. Who created God, right?
Right.
Let's just deal with the question on its face. Who created God? Well, there's two possibilities. Since something exists, something has always existed, right? We exist, so something must have always existed. If we exist, something must have always existed. But I haven't been here forever, so there must be something outside of me that has been here forever. There's two possibilities. Either the universe has always existed, or something outside the universe has always existed. All the evidence seems to point that the universe had a beginning, which means that the cause must transcend space, matter, and time, because space, matter, and time were created. If the cause is timeless, does the cause have a beginning?
Well, I guess what I want to get at is the cause that transcends space, time, and matter.
Well, you can't go on
has to have
forever.
a cause. I mean,
Right.
You can't just stop at one level and not go all the way. You know, if everything has a cause, then the next level has a cause.
Well, see, that's the problem.
And you can also argue that instead of God, then you do have a multiverse that we just can't measure, and that is inclusive in the universe.
But again, the law of causality does not say everything has a cause. It says everything that comes to be has a cause.
But God came to be. I mean, you can't.
Well,
can't
you
do
see,
that.
but that's not what theists believe, that God came to be. If God is outside of
It doesn't
time,
matter what they believe, it's what's true.
right, and that's exactly right. What is true. So if space, matter, and time had a beginning, the cause can't be made of space, matter, and time, right?
Okay, so it's made of something else about which we don't know.
Timeless. It's got to be something timeless. If something is timeless, does it have a beginning?
Time is purely human creation. You can't actually even prove that time is real.
I don't have time for this. Let's not get into a philosophical discussion of time, but the point is, if something is outside the universe and is timeless, it does not have a beginning, right? There has to be an uncaused first cause. Look, Aristotle knew this, Plato knew this, Socrates, this is not new. There has to be an uncaused first cause. The question is, what is the uncaused first cause? Now, in the debate that Lennox had with Dawkins, Dawkins kept asking Lennox, well, who made your creator? And Lennox said to Dawkins, well, I believe God created everything, and you're saying the universe created you, right? Well, Richard, who created the universe?
And who created that which created the universe?
Well, there has to be
the
an
fact that there
endpoint.
has to be an uncaused cause is purely a human idea.
There has to be an uncaused first cause somewhere. It's either the universe or something beyond the universe.
Even if there is, though, the human mind can't conceive of that. So, I mean,
Why
it could be a
not?
multiverse.
Wait, we just did. Why not?
No, you didn't actually conceive of it. You labeled it God, but it could be the universe itself. Like, why not just include it into the universe as a whole? It just
Well,
doesn't
because
seem
it
very logical.
has to be a personal being to create.
No, it doesn't. Why would it have to be a personal being?
Were you here for this? I'll say it again. Because to go from a state of nothingness to a state of creation, someone has to make a choice. And
No. Why would anybody
beings,
have to make a choice?
well, because non-personal beings don't make choices, or I should say non-personal forces don't make choices. For example,
You
gravity
can't prove that, though.
gravity doesn't choose.
But gravity's a law, so you could argue, I mean, laws don't have consciousness, but then again, if law is...
Alright. You got another mic, or did that just lose its battery? What's your name, by the way? Hey, we'll get you another mic.
Well, we can talk about that all day, so...
Yeah, you know, this should be more about questions. I know a lot of people want to debate, but then we got a big long line behind us. So try and just get to a question, and I'll try and answer it as much as I can, and if not, we can talk later, but let's keep it moving if we can. Yes, sir.
So, in regard to the argument about the universe as design, wouldn't the fact that if it was off by, say, those perturbations of 10 to the 40th, or 10 to the negative 40th, whatever it is,
Yes, sir.
wouldn't we not exist then, and thus we would not be able to experience the fact that it was off by that?
Oh, sure, that's true. Yeah, we wouldn't be able to experience it. That's true.
So, the very fact that we observe that it's designed is as a result of us existing. So, there is no necessarily need for it to be designed, because we exist, we can observe that. So, for example, if the universe were to expand, if the universe were to never expand, it would never exist, right? But we exist already. We know that we exist in some sense.
True.
Therefore, the universe had to expand. Therefore, there doesn't need to be a design aspect. In order for us to exist, the universe has to exist.
So this is the argument that some have put forth that say we shouldn't be surprised to observe the fine-tuning of the universe, because if the universe wasn't fine-tuned, we wouldn't be here to observe it. Okay, well that's an obvious tautology, we might say, but that doesn't explain why the universe is the way it is. Let me give you an illustration, maybe this will clear it up a little bit. Let's suppose that, that you and I are playing poker. What are the odds of getting a royal flush? Well, it's like 600,000 something to 1. And I get a royal flush one time, you go, oh, that's a lucky hand. But then suppose I get a royal flush for the next 10 hands in a row. What are you going to say?
Probably cheating.
Yeah, I'm cheating. Obviously, I'm cheating. Suppose I go, no, I'm not cheating. We just happen to be in the universe where because there are a lot of universes out there, we just happen to be in the universe where I get 10 royal flushes in a row by chance. And by the way, you shouldn't be surprised at this, because if you weren't in this universe, you wouldn't be here to observe it. That would not explain why I have 10 royal flushes in a row, right?
At the same time, the universe is very, very large. So
yes,
there's all those failed experiments. Even if we are the only life we know in the universe, but the universe is probabilistically large enough that we can care about it. So,
well, again, you could say anything's possible, right? Yeah, I could get 10 royal flushes in a row without a design. The question isn't what's possible, the question is what's most probable. And what we're doing here is going to the inference to the best explanation. Is it possible I get 10 royal flushes in a row? Sure. Is it possible that 10 to the 40th power kind of precision was just happened? No, it's possible, but what's most reasonable? That's the question, and I think it's most reasonable to say a designer did it. Just like I would say, it's most reasonable you're cheating if you get 10 royal flushes in a row.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. The Green Bay Packers, yes, sir.
Ryan.
Hey, Ryan.
This question kind of steers away from science and atheism, but it's one of the more common objections and questions Christians face. Is that okay if I ask that? That's why is yeah, like I said, it's one of the more common questions we face in today's world. That's how would you expect Christians to answer the question? Why is homosexuality wrong?
Why is homosexuality wrong? Well, that's a whole other seminar. But you know, the Christian view, of course, is that all sex outside of marriage is wrong. Why? Because at the end of the day, it's destructive. And the point here is that, according to Christian theology, that God made man and woman to procreate in a marriage relationship. And that actually is an illustration, by the way, in Christian theology, of our ultimate union with Christ. That marriage is an illustration of our union with Christ. And so it's not just homosexuality, it's any sex outside that bond of marriage. Now, people have made arguments from natural law, people have made arguments from all sorts of different social reasons, but that's the Christian world.
So is there a way you would use science to answer that question, like you answered one of the other questions here?
Well, you can use statistical data, social science data. You can do that if you want. Yeah, sure. All right, thank you. Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
My name's Emily.
Hey, Emily.
It's nice to hear the whole talk today. My question regards the Francis Crick quote that you
Yes.
put up there. First off, I want to ask you if you've ever taken a neurobiology class.
Neurobiology, no.
Yeah, or biochemistry class. You know what a neurotransmitter is?
Yeah, vaguely, yeah.
Okay. So then, if you have that quote from such a renowned scientist, how would you counteract whole neurons and synapses cause your thoughts? Like, is there some other thing that you were thinking of? Like, did God give you your thoughts?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Why have you already won the Nobel Prize or are some sort of great scientist?
Well, the question here, you're always going to find a correlation between neurosynapses and thoughts, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only thing in play. Like when I do this, I'm choosing to do that, but neurosynapses are involved, right? So there's a person here directing this. In fact, this is one of the things, of course, that materialists can't answer, intentionality. In fact, you just asked me a question intentionally, right? And now I'm responding to it intentionally. If we're just molecules in motion, how do I even know what question you're asking and how do I respond? Huh?
We are molecules.
Oh, yes, we are molecules in motion, but are we only molecules in motion? That's the question. Well, how can any theory that comes up with that be trusted if the theory, if the person doing the theory or doing the experiment is just molecules in motion.
Well, I'd like to see you disprove that then, so you should get in the lab.
Well, again, when you go into the lab and do that, you're assuming you have a mind, not just a brain. So that when you look at the data, you can abstract data, or you can abstract data from the real world and then interpret it freely by using reason and the laws of logic and the laws of rational inference to come up with a conclusion. But to say, to presuppose that your mind is your brain, you shouldn't believe anything you believe, because we'd be no different than a Coke can physic. See, this is why I mean at the very essence of reality is something metaphysical, not physical. We're using metaphysical realities right now to communicate that can't be explained by materials, the laws of logic. You're not going to find them in a drawer somewhere. You're not going to go home and find, oh, there's the law of non-contradiction. No. It's something immaterial that we have to rely on in order to communicate. Thank you. Yes, sir.
So, hello. Thank you for giving the talk tonight. I found it interesting, to say the least.
Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name is Michael.
Hey, Michael.
As much as I would love to go on for hours with you about a variety of topics, I'd like to focus on a couple of things. To begin with the cosmological order you established. You make the claim that God is a timeless, spaceless, immaterial being that somehow existed before there was time, space, or material. Can you please explain to me how something can exist without time, space, or material to exist out of? And if you can't explain how that's possible, can you please demonstrate it?
Sure.
Show me it somewhere?
Sure. The laws of logic we're using right now are outside of time, they're outside of space, they're not made of material.
I would argue that they don't actually exist then. I would argue that they are in fact an inductive tool.
So you're saying they do really exist?
No.
Yeah, you're saying they do.
How am I saying that they do?
Because you're using the law of non-contradiction right now to say I'm wrong.
Alternatively, it's simply something that happens to keep working. It doesn't necessarily mean it exists in any real
All right, Michael,
sense.
let me ask you a question because this is an important point here. Before, ontologically before, not chronologically. Or not, wait, let's do chronologically. You're basically saying laws of logic are human conventions.
Yes.
Okay. Before there were any humans on the earth, say just dinosaurs, was the statement, there are no humans on the earth, true?
I would contend that truth in that sense, you responded to the statement, I responded, can't be no. You responded to that by saying that violates the law of non-contradiction, which I didn't really understand how that was the case. But more directly in this scenario, to say that before humans were on the earth, the statement there are no humans on the earth is true, I would argue requires some consciousness to be around in order to arrive at that statement.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to be believed. It doesn't even have to be known, but is it true?
I would argue in that scenario that we can't actually comment on its truth.
No, you just did.
No, I'd argue there's not a consciousness to how to perceive the truth in the scenario you're describing. In which case there cannot be a truth.
Again, I'm not talking about epistemology, how you know it. I'm talking about ontology. Is the statement, there are no human beings on the earth, true, prior to human beings being on the earth, regardless of whether or not anyone knows it?
From my position, I can comment that from what we know of the way the universe works, that is likely to be the case, but I cannot comment absolutely on it being the truth.
Okay, that's fine.
That would be my response to that.
Okay.
In which case, I still would put forward the challenge, demonstrate anything capable of performing something independently, like a consciousness, capable of existing in this manner, beyond abstract rules.
Well, Michael, that's the very question we're investigating.
So I'm asking you to show it.
Well, that's what I've been trying to do. You might not find that
All you've shown me
persuasive.
is physical phenomena. These are material things that exist in time and exist in
That
space.
came into existence from non-material things. That's the point.
All right, so more directly then, the claim is that in order for these things to exist, there had to be some sort of cause for them, which is how we can say that there had to be something before them. If I understand your line of reasoning.
There has to be something before what?
There has to be something before the things that we say are material, or are within time, or are within space, or do exist. There would have to be something before them to cause them. That was part of your basic argument.
Well, there has to be some ground of being. Again, either the universe is the ground of being, or something beyond the universe is the ground of being. All the scientific and philosophical evidence, not just from me, from atheists and agnostics are saying this, Michael. Okay? That the universe had a beginning. So the implication of that is that whatever began it can't be made of space, can't be made of matter, can't be made of time. It's got to be something that's spaceless, timeless, and immaterial.
This would imply that the law of causality somehow functions before there's time for the law of causality to function in.
Well, the law of causality does function independent of time.
Can you prove that?
Yes.
Do so.
Okay. An argument against, in fact, it's stated better this way, that the law of causality is not just physical, it's metaphysical. In other words, it's beyond just the physical. It's not just when I hit a billiard ball with a cue that it moves the billiard ball. Of course it does, but it's also metaphysical. Like, for example, a classic argument against God is the syllogism, if gratuitous evil exists, God doesn't exist. Gratuitous evil exists, therefore God doesn't exist, right? That's an argument against God.
Not a very good one.
Not a very good one, but yes, okay. But some have made this in debates. In fact, I've been in a debate where the guy used this. Well, there's no physical connection between those premises. Yet the conclusion follows that the premises are true. This is a metaphysical example of the law of causality. In fact, we wouldn't be able to think, we wouldn't be able to make arguments unless the law of causality applied to arguments themselves.
So what if I were to say that there's a physical thing in the universe that doesn't seem to obey the law of causality? What does that tell you?
What would that be?
I would use radioactive decay and the energetic decay of electron elements. Both of these things decay spontaneously without any determinable cause.
Well, just because we can't determine the cause, just like at the quantum level, doesn't mean there isn't a cause. That's epistemology and ontology. Just because we don't know the cause doesn't mean there isn't a cause.
In which case, I would pose what is to suggest that there is a cause. In this scenario, why would you say there is one when you have no evidence of that being the case?
Well, because science itself is based on the law of causality. That's what scientists do when they're doing science. They're trying to figure out what particular cause causes a particular effect. If we want to dispense with the law of causality, we can no longer do science, can we?
What I'm trying to demonstrate here is the fact that it only functions within a time-based system. You can't apply causality to say something causes an effect, that effect causes something else, which is further effect. But in a scenario where you don't have time for that to function, that's illogical.
No, well, first of all, I thought you just told me logic was a human convention. So, by the way, if logic were a human convention, then if you had your own idea of the laws of logic and I had my own ideas of laws of logic, we couldn't communicate.
But the tension here is that we use logic because it keeps working. Because we keep finding examples of it that keep predicting an answer that is useful or correct. But we can't actually demonstrate.
But Michael, we wouldn't know it was useful or correct unless we had the laws of logic by which to evaluate it.
Or we can demonstrate it by simply being able to make a prediction, use our laws of logic in order to come up with a
All right, you and I can go on and we got a line behind me. Let me just ask you one question, Michael, because I see you got a shirt that bad religion, he's got a shirt on that says cross to bad religion. Let me just ask you a question straight out. Will you give me an honest answer? If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian?
I would need to kind of demonstrate it to me that Christianity was true.
But if it was true?
Would I answer my question then? Is it demonstrated to me that it's true, or is it simply some abstract statement that's speaking that it's true?
Well, yeah, if there was evidence for it, and if you, through reasoning, said, this is more probably true than not, would you be a Christian?
I would believe in God. I would believe in Christ. I would not follow Christ because I think his teachings are wrong based on my own ideology that I've derived based on what I've observed.
Okay, so you have your own standard of morality, and if Christ doesn't meet that, then he's wrong, and you're going to just do your own thing.
I wouldn't say he's wrong. I'd say I disagree with him, and I'm not going to follow him on that basis.
Okay, well, that's your choice. That's why God gives us free will. Thank you.
And while I'm up here, I give a shout out to talkorigins.org. I was able to find a response to everything he said on it.
Yes, sir. What's your name?
Kay.
Sorry?
Kay.
Kay?
Yeah.
Get a little closer if you would to the mic.
I think that first thing is scientists doesn't try to disprove God. They find the truth. They find out the truth. So if the truth does contradict the Bible or Quran or anything else, it means that scientists are not trying to disprove it. They just find out of the atheist before I come to the next question. You said that there is fine-tuning in design, but as we have seen that it is shown in the evidence that the universe is actually a chaotic stage, that little changes actually has enormous effects. For example,
I can hardly hear it, so you guys mind just keep it down a little bit. Just, if you can get to the question.
Right. Okay. I'm trying to say this, there is no fine-tuning design. Actually, everything is in a chaotic stage. Little changes have enormous effects. For example, you said that...
You're talking about chaos theory?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure, chaos theory is true, but chaos theory doesn't, has nothing to say about the fine-tuning of the universe. It's simply saying that a butterfly flapping its wings in Africa can create a chain of events that might cause a hurricane in New Orleans. But that says nothing on whether or not the universe is fine-tuned. And by the way, that is fine-tuned is not really up for dispute even among atheists. They're trying to find a different explanation for it via the multiverse. But they don't debate and say, well, it doesn't appear fine-tuned. They say it does appear fine-tuned, but they're trying to come up with another explanation.
Now it's fine-tuned right now. Like, right at this moment, it is, for example, this building is fine-tuned. But in moments, it will sort of change things. For example, let's say our solar system was not 9 planets. It was all clusters of rocks. So as time process, these rocks, these clusters actually become more and more closer and become planets. So,
what's the question, Jay?
I'm trying to say that there is no like popping, like it doesn't. Nothing happens in a snap of fingers. Everything has a process of time, and you are saying like everything happens in a second.
All right, well, let me go back. There's 3 different kinds of fine-tuning. There's the initial conditions of the universe. There's the laws of nature themselves and the constants which go in the equations of the laws of nature. And from the very beginning, the initial conditions of the universe were highly fine-tuned. That's why Hawking said if you change the expansion rate, it wouldn't be here, just slightly. So someone had to put that in the very initial conditions. You can't get there via some evolutionary, cosmic evolutionary argument because you need those conditions in the very beginning. Let me move on to the next guy.
Actually, I would say one thing about life. Actually, I'm not sure if you know, but life doesn't become with MOBs. They actually become with amino acids. They are like few molecules. So as molecules they become, these amino acids become RNA, DNA, and these become cells.
Yeah, well, the problem is that there's an irreducibly complex problem at the very beginning of life where RNA, DNA, the cell, and proteins all need one another at the same time. And so you can't go from one to the other without the others existing. So that's one of the problems. Let me move on to the next guy, please. Yes, sir. What's your name? Ray?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So, regarding morality,
yes, sir.
I didn't really. I heard sort of a straw man argument that we provided for the atheists. There's plenty of moral theories out there that don't invoke God.
Such as?
Such as utilitarianism, which does not need to invoke God. Egoism.
All right, let's start with utilitarianism because that's a good one. How would you describe utilitarianism?
Whatever provides the most net pleasure among humanity or among living things is good. Whatever provides.
That's usually more hedonism rather than utilitarianism. Normally says whatever provides the most good. Okay. It's semantics at that point. Well, the problem is
you're trying to lead me into saying it's good, but I know exactly what you're doing.
Well, the problem is utilitarianism smuggles in a moral law. It says that you ought to do good for the most number. Well, first of all, what does good mean? And secondly, why ought I do it? Who said? And then thirdly, how do you know the outcome? You have to be outside of time to know whether the outcome does bring the most good for the most people. And fourthly, it would create a problem whereby maybe if you executed an innocent man, it might quell an angry mob. Should you do that?
I'm not arguing for the theory. I'm just presenting them and saying that very fact that these theories exist and that atheists apply them mean that they can justify morality using these terms.
Well, they try and justify them, but what I'm saying is I haven't seen a theory that can justify them. You brought one up, and I said there are so many holes in utilitarianism that you can come up with all sorts of theories. I don't know, you and atheists can come up with all sorts of theories, but that doesn't mean they have a good one that can justify why there is a moral law.
But by that same token, you can't justify your beliefs either. If you can't posit a theory to justify your beliefs, then everything is a theory until it's proven.
But is that a theory? That everything's a theory?
Okay. Basically, theories are theories until
well, that's true. I think the question is what is proven. And science, by definition, is tentative. The first two arguments were scientific. The last argument is philosophical. And can I prove to you that murder is wrong? No, I can't prove it to you. Why? You already know it. Right? I can't prove it to you. All I can do is get you to recognize what you already know. And if it really is wrong to torture babies for fun's sake, then there has to be an authority figure that establishes why that's wrong. Otherwise, it's just two human opinions.
There has to be, maybe there has to be a guideline, but that doesn't necessarily need to be God. It can be agreed. It can be a social contract, for example.
That's not God. Social contract's not God.
Exactly.
Right. So that, I don't know what you mean by social contract. You talk about a being or not a being?
I'm talking about it doesn't need to invoke a being.
But if it doesn't invoke a being, then you're back to just human opinion. Whose opinion? Yours or Motors? Or his?
I'm saying that if you invoke a moral standard that we can all agree with, it doesn't need to involve God at all.
It has nothing to do with whether we agree on it. Suppose the Nazis had won World War II and brainwashed everybody to believe that murdering Jews, gypsies, homosexuals was the right thing to do. Should we do it?
That's not, I mean, the social contract.
Suppose they have a social contract.
It's supposed to be inclusive of everybody.
That's a moral law. You're just smuggling right in there.
Exactly. But it's one we can agree on. It doesn't need to invoke God.
But why? The question, I'm not talking about whether or not we can agree on it. What does that have to do with whether it's really right or wrong? I just said if we can all agree to murder Jews, homosexuals, and gypsies, should we do it? Should we?
If we could all agree on it, that would imply there was like completely no doubt reasons that you would do it, and there would be no objections.
But should we do it? The question is it moral to do? And if you say no, then you're appealing to a standard outside of yourself.
In that completely, utterly unrealistic hypothesis, yes.
It's moral to do. Okay, well, I can't convince you. If you're going to say that that's right, there's nothing I can say. Nothing else I can say to you, right? I can't convince you of something you already know. You already know that would be wrong, and you're telling me that would be right. I'm sorry, there's nothing else I can do.
That's sort of how I feel regarding religion, so.
Well, you know what? I agree with you on religion, because Jesus came to get rid of religion. Well, maybe his followers did an awful job.
Yes,
in fact, would you indulge me for 4 minutes? I want to show you a video you may have seen. You may not.
What if I told you Jesus came to abolish religion? What if I told you voting Republican really wasn't his mission? What if I told you Republican doesn't automatically mean Christian, and just because you call some people blind doesn't automatically give you vision? I mean, if religion is so great, why has it started so many wars? Why does it build huge churches but fails to feed the poor? Tell single moms God doesn't love them if they've ever had a divorce. But in the Old Testament, God actually calls religious people whores. Religion might preach grace, but another thing they practice. Tend to ridicule God's people. They did it to John the Baptist. They can't fix their problems, and so they just mask it, not realizing religion's like spraying perfume on a casket. See, the problem with religion is it never gets to the core. It's just behavior modification, like a long list of chores. Like, let's dress up the outside, make it look nice and neat. But it's funny, that's what they used to do to mummies while the corpse rots underneath. Now, I ain't judging, I'm just saying, quit putting on a fake look. Because there's a problem if people only know that you're a Christian by your Facebook. I mean, in every other aspect of life, you know that logic's unworthy. It's like saying you play for the Lakers just because you bought a jersey. See, this was me too, but no one seemed to be on to me. Acting like a church kid while addicted to pornography. See, on Sunday I'd go to church, but Saturday getting faded, acting if I was simply created to just have sex and get wasted. See, I spent my whole life building this facade of meekness, but now that I know Jesus, I boast in my weakness. Because if grace is water, then the church should be an ocean. It's not a museum for good people, it's a hospital for the broken. Which means I don't have to hide my failure, I don't have to hide my sin. Because it doesn't depend on me, it depends on Him. See, because when I was God's enemy, and certainly not a fan, He looked down and said, I want that man. Which is why Jesus hated religion, and for it He called them fools. Don't you see so much better than just following some rules? Now let me clarify. I love the church, I love the Bible, and yes, I believe in sin. But if Jesus came to your church, would they actually let Him in? See, remember He was called a glutton and a drunkard by religious men. But the Son of God never supports self-righteousness, not now, not then. Now back to the point, one thing is vital to mention. How Jesus and religion are on opposite spectrums. See, one's the work of God, but one's a man-made invention. See, one is the cure, but the other's the infection. See, because religion says do, Jesus says done. Religion says slave, Jesus says son. Religion puts you in bondage, while Jesus sets you free. Religion makes you blind, but Jesus makes you see. And that's why religion and Jesus are two different clans. Religion is man searching for God. Christianity is God searching for man. Which is why salvation is freely mine, and forgiveness is my own. Not based on my merits, but Jesus' obedience alone. Because He took the crown of thorns and the blood dripped down His face. He took what we all deserve. I guess that's why He called it grace. And while being murdered, He yelled, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Because when He was dangling on that cross, He was thinking of you. And He absorbed all your sin, and He buried it in the tomb, which is why I'm kneeling at the cross saying, come on, there's room. So for religion, no, I hate it. In fact, I literally resent it. Because when Jesus said, it is finished, I believe He meant it.
There may be somebody in your past or your present that said they were a Christian and tried to get you to come under some sort of religious dogma. That's not Christianity.
What is it?
What is it? It's religion. And that's what we've had.
No, I mean, what is Christianity?
What is Christianity? Christianity, as he just said, is not us trying to work our way to God. That's religion. It's God working His way to man. That the God of the universe came to earth, took on human flesh, lived a perfect life in our place, suffered, died, and then offers His sacrifice to us because we've all fallen short.
If that were the case, then we wouldn't need any of the rules that Christianity provides, because God would find His way to us, and we wouldn't have to do anything.
We don't have to do anything, but like Augustine said 1,600 years ago, love God and do as you please.
We wouldn't have to do anything to get to heaven.
We don't. All we have to do is accept the free gift. That's the whole point.
That's doing something. If you believe in Christ, that's doing something. That is taking action. If God were going down to us, we wouldn't need to take any sort of action.
Why? Are you saying that if I give you a gift, that you taking it is work?
It is technically, yeah.
Is it hard work?
It's not hard work, it's not
Then
hard work.
why wouldn't you take it?
Because there's a lot of baggage attached to that gift.
What's the baggage attached? No, all the baggage is dropped with the gift. That's the point. You don't have any more baggage after that. Because Christ's perfect life is imputed to you. See, Christianity isn't just about forgiveness. It's that God gives you His righteousness, and He gives it to you.
And if you're homosexual?
Anybody. He gives it to everybody who accepts the free gift.
Then what's the fuss?
What's the fuss about what?
Sexuality, or any sort of sin.
Well, because sin separates us from God. And when Augustine said, love God and do as you please, what he meant was, if you love God, you will do what pleases Him. And look, the reason there are moral precepts is because we live in a fallen world. And when we go outside certain boundaries, we are a danger to ourselves. Does God get anything out of you obeying Him? No, He's an infinite being. You can't add to it, you can't take away from it.
If that's the
You
case,
get something out of it.
If that's the case, why does He intervene at all?
I'm sorry, why does what?
Why does He intervene at all?
Why is it? Because He loves us. That's why He intervenes.
So He does get something.
I'm sorry?
So He does get something out of it. Because if He loves us, then that love gives Him something.
Well, He, in a certain sense, and this is getting into theological water here when we talk about impassibility, which means God has emotions, but they're not changed by anything external to Him. He's always pleased with faith and love, and He's always upset with sin. But He doesn't change, we change. When we sin, we're under His wrath. When we have faith, we're under His love. But He doesn't change, we change.
How could a being that doesn't change create people that do?
How can a being who doesn't change create people that do? Why can't a being who doesn't change create people? I don't see why that's a impossibility.
If we were made in His image,
Well,
surely He must change.
okay, that's a good question. What is God's image? That's what we're saying now. When it says you're made in God's image, it doesn't mean you look like God. Why? Because God is an immaterial being. It doesn't look like anything. It means you're a person like God. That you have mind, emotion, and will. That you reason, that you feel, and that you have emotion, or that you want things. These things are God as well. That He has mind, emotion, and will. Now, He has them in a different way than we have them. But we are persons like Him. We're moral beings. And that's what it means to be made in God's image. As far as we know, there's no other creature in the universe like this.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you very much. By the way, for those who want to see that video again, that video is called Why I Hate Religion But Love Jesus. It was made by a couple of guys in Seattle. It's over 25 million hits. Yes, sir. Go ahead. What's your name?
Matt.
Hey, Matt. Go ahead.
You were just talking to him and you said he over and over and over. How do you know God's in there?
I don't know God's in male.
Yeah.
Well, that's just convention, basically. That's what most of the world religions say. Of course, what the Bible says. When we say He, we don't think God He doesn't have genitals because He's not a physical being. When Jesus came to earth and added humanity to His deity, then obviously He was a male. But when we say we're made in the image of God, we don't say that the image is sexual. We say the image is mind, emotion, and will.
So you're saying that you know for sure He's a male?
Well, it depends what you mean by male. Again, He doesn't have genitals, but a father...
Why don't you say she?
Huh?
Why don't you say she?
Well, because nowhere in any of the writings is it called a she. That's why. I mean, it could be a she, but father, again, gives the idea of protector and creator. So that's another reason. In fact, in one of the scriptures in the Bible, in Romans 8, it talks about we can call God Daddy, our Father. I mean, it's something that we can understand because we have earthly fathers. So that kind of thought is transmitted to God.
Okay, do you believe that animals can talk?
Can animals talk? If God wants them to talk, they can. Just like if God wants to create the universe out of nothing, He can do so.
Okay, so you think that if you go anywhere in the world, you can find an animal that would be talking?
If God wanted it to talk. You're talking about...
Would it be a miracle?
The donkey? Well, if it was a miracle, yeah. Because animals don't normally talk. Now people go, well, that's incredible. How can you believe an animal can talk? Well, if an animal does talk, that would be a miracle, right? Well, if animals talked all the time, would the donkey miracle in the Bible be considered a miracle? No. The very thing that gets our attention about miracles is they don't happen all the time. They have to be unusual. Otherwise, it wouldn't get our attention.
The last thing is you said that, say, God created the Big Bang, which I don't really believe, but if he created the Big Bang, it's been scientifically proven that everything goes back to the Big Bang. So if he just created the Big Bang, has science created everything else outside of the Big Bang?
What do you mean by science?
Laws of gravity, everything that you said that the astronomers have proved.
There's only 4 natural forces known to man. Gravity, strong weak nuclear forces, and electromagnetism. Okay? Those 4 forces, at the initial, prior to Planck time, were not separated. Planck time is 10 to the negative 43 seconds after the Big Bang. They got separated later. So, if you're a deist, you believe God created the universe and then created the natural forces, and still holds it together but doesn't intervene, you can say you're a deist. But if God ever intervenes in the time-space continuum, like for a resurrection, or the donkey, or Noah, or Jonah, or parting the Red Sea, then he intervenes. That would be a deist.
And how come he doesn't intervene anytime nowadays?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, it begs the question that he doesn't, right? He might. But if you look at the Bible, and Christian theologians have different views of this, if you look at the Bible, say from Moses to Jesus, that's about a 1,500-year period. How many miracles are there in that period? Does anyone know? Approximately? About 250. So you have 250 miracles over a 1,500-year period. Now we think when we look at the Bible, miracles are happening all the time. They're not. In fact, if you took 250 miracles and divided them over a 1,500-year period, you get 1 miracle every 6 years. But do they happen that way? Miracle, 6 years later, miracle, 6 years later, miracle? No, they don't happen that way. But where do they happen? Generally, they happen in bunches around new prophets. For example, miracles occur around Moses, Elijah, and Jesus and the apostles. Why? Because there's new revelation that needs new confirmation. That the miracle confirms the messenger. That the sign confirms the sermon. In other words, miracles were used to get our attention. Say, Moses says to God, why would Pharaoh let my people go? Don't worry, Moses, you'll be able to do some miracles and will convince Pharaoh that you speak for me. Okay, so miracles are used to confirm a new message from God. That's why they don't happen all the time. They happen for specific reasons.
Okay. And how come God never heals amputees?
How come God never heals amputees? Well, first of all, I don't know if he never heals amputees. But if he doesn't heal amputees, that doesn't mean God doesn't exist. I don't know. Why does it?
I've been to Vietnam and back, and I've seen amputees healed. And Jesus healed an amputee when Peter chopped off the guy's ear.
Well, he did. Yeah, he did do that in the gospel. You're right.
But I've seen amputees from Vietnam healed, like a leg blown off, healed.
All right. Well, thanks, Art. I hadn't seen that.
Can you show me a video of it? I didn't have a camera in 1971.
That's like I could say I saw a dinosaur earlier today.
What's that?
I could say I saw a dinosaur earlier today. It's the same thing he's saying. That you saw.
Well, you have to evaluate every claim by the evidence. Every miracle claim has to be investigated, and then you have to come to a conclusion. So, is it true? We don't know. You have to investigate. Okay, but you can't say it's impossible if God exists. If God exists, He can do it. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. What's your name?
It's Lexi. Lexi.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. I feel like I need a disclaimer. They call it a disclaimer, right? When something comes with instructions.
All right.
Up here because I just want you to know that I don't want to be attacked and like they also call it devil's advocate, you know, right?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
You're asking a question.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't necessarily like believe in my question.
That's all right. Go ahead.
My question. Okay. So don't know my opinion. What? Can you explain pantheism a little bit more?
Well, pantheism, again, pantheists believe that all is God. They call me God, you God, the floor God, the earth God, everything's God. But this God doesn't really have any power because it's just the universe. It's no different than calling, atheists say all that exists is the universe. universe, and pantheists say, yes, all that exists is the universe, but let's call it God.
Okay. So then, do you think there's something beyond the universe?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, that transcends the universe would be a theistic God,
Okay.
who's holding it together right now.
But according to pantheists, like, by my understanding, do pantheists believe that like, God basically is the universe and there's nothing beyond?
Generally, yes, God is the universe, yeah. The problem is, as I said before, I can't see how you distinguish that from atheism. How's that different from atheism? It's just different terminology. Atheists say there is no God, pantheists say the universe is God. Okay?
I don't know, it's over my head.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
I'm Eric.
Hey, Eric.
First of all, I really enjoyed your talk. I should say that I'm kind of trying to find, I guess, myself spiritually. So, I've gone back and forth. I'll ask like two of my biggest questions that I guess maybe sometimes keep me from believing in theism and Christianity. First is like, I guess the problem of other religions, like it always just gets out, and I mean you'll hear it all the time. There's so many different religions in the world. How do they know? How do we know ours, or one is exactly the right one? And especially given that I'm in an anthropology class right now, where we look at all these different religions, and it seems to be that a lot of different religions are in place because they have a function. They serve a function.
Sure.
In the middle of an economic and political, social system. I guess I just want to know, what would you say it seems to me that that's almost like a human construction. Humans are constructed.
Well, I agree with that, and that's exactly what that video was saying. That we construct religions to work our way to God, where Christianity is God works his way to man by just saying, here's a free gift. We try and do, and Christ says, it's done, I've done it. So it's totally opposite to what just about every other world religion, if you want to call Christianity religion, does.
And then I think I just got the second question. It's something I've been thinking about, but it came to me while another person asked a similar question. But I've always also been wondering, like, why, if God, loves us so much, why doesn't he, why doesn't he make himself known, more explicitly?
Okay, so the hiddenness of God question. Yeah, basically, which is a good question. Let me give you a couple of points on that. I've got only 400 slides in here. We're going to go through them all tonight. Say it isn't so. Call for vectors, Victor. Get a clearance. Any airplane fans in here? Woo! Come on! I'm looking for a particular slide here, but I got so many of them that sometimes I don't find them immediately, so hold on. Here you go. Is God hidden too much? First of all, I would argue that everyone has evidence of God through his effects: creation, design, reason, information, morality, conscience, the natural order. In other words, you may have heard, what about people who've never heard? Well, there's no such person. Everybody knows there's a creator God. We may suppress it because we want to go our own way, but the idea that there's a creator God, a moral God, is given to everybody because you have creation, you have conscience, you have all the order in the world, which seems to indicate there must be an orderer. Secondly, some have gotten more evidence, but to whom much is given, much will be required. For example, Moses has more evidence than I have, right? Okay, he saw things that I never saw, but it's only fair that to whom much is given, much will be required. Thirdly, God doesn't want mere intellectual assent, but love, and love requires freedom. Soren Kierkegaard told a parable about a king who noticed a beautiful young woman in one of his villages. And he saw this woman, immediately fell in love with her. But he knew that if he went to the village with his king garb on and the chariots and the flags, she might just melt according to his power, not because she truly loved him. So what did he do? He decided to renounce the throne, become a peasant, and win her as a peer. And then he knew that she truly loved him and that he truly loved her because they were peers then. Well, that's exactly what God does for us. He came to earth as a peasant. In fact, Philippians chapter 2 talks about this, a servant. He gave up for a time the benefits of being God and came to earth as a human and suffered for us. He got on our level and he offers himself to us. But if he had come down, as he will at one point, with all sorts of power, he might have just overwhelmed our free will. Finally, there is enough evidence to warrant belief and trust in God, but not too much to negate our freedom. If you truly want to go your own way, you can. This world is a world of testing. It's a world of opportunity. It's up to you whether or not you want to follow. So God gives enough evidence, but not so much that you're so totally compelled to say, okay! If you want to go your own way, you can. By the way, Romans, if you want a good piece of literature on this, the book of Romans chapter 1 goes through what happens to us when we continually suppress the truth about God. And it goes back to the quote that I gave earlier about Pascal, where he said, people invariably believe what they want to believe, not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. What's your name?
Hello, my name is Jordan.
Hey, Jordan.
You agreed that God is infinite and all-powerful and created the universe. God also influences this universe and manifests in this universe. So why can't God be transcendent of this universe and also be a part of this universe? Basically mixing theism and pantheism.
Well, you mean, could he be a being in the universe?
In and out of the
Well,
universe.
he is at various times. Like when Jesus came, his divine nature was outside the universe and his human nature was inside the universe.
But I mean for all of the time. Is there any reason why God is not always present with us in this universe, in the things around us, but also
Well,
outside?
he is. He is present to all things. He's holding all things together right now. I mean, think about this. If there is no God, why are the laws of nature so precise? And why are they so reliable? I mean, if there's nothing holding all this together, why don't things just fly apart?
So then why does proving theism disprove pantheism? Because if
Because-
God exists in the universe and is holding the universe together, is that really very much different from being the universe?
Yes, because God, the difference between pantheism and theism, again, theism, a theistic God transcends the universe. He's not made of space, matter, or time. A pantheistic God is made of space, matter, and time, is in the universe. Where God holds the universe together, he is not the universe. Okay? He holds it together through power, but he is not molecules in me and you. He holds it together. I don't know. And another way of looking at this, if his being can't be both infinite and finite in the sense that they're the same being, because then a finite God would be a changing God. And, we change.
Then wasn't that Jesus, though?
No, Jesus had two natures. He had a finite nature. He was fully human, but also he was fully God. So whenever you ask a question about Jesus, you always have to ask two questions.
So then why can't everything have two natures?
What do you mean everything?
If God, Jesus, had a finite and an infinite nature, why cannot everything have both a finite and infinite nature?
Everything? Because everything can't be finite or can't be infinite. A thing isn't whatever you mean by thing. Can a ball be infinite?
Jesus was a thing.
Yes.
Jesus was a man, was a thing.
Right, but he's finite. He can't also be infinite in the same sense.
You said he had a finite and an infinite nature.
Yeah, they're two different natures. They're not the same nature.
So then why can't everything have a finite and an infinite nature?
Because it would be, like for example, a ball. You can't have an infinite ball, right? It's a finite thing. Jesus had, you could have another.
I'm talking infinite in the spiritual sense, not the physical sense.
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm following this now. All right, we can talk later. I'm not sure what you mean. Let me just deal with the Trinity very quickly though, because that is, because you're hovering around there, Jordan. There's no perfect illustration of the Trinity, but this is, I think, pretty good. the fact that we have one triangle with a Father, Son, Holy Spirit, so you have a divine nature that's shared by three persons, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. But Jesus has a human nature that is distinct from the divine nature. He's fully human, and he is also fully divine. You could also put it this way, that the one divine nature is one what, but it has three who's, where Jesus, who two, has two what's. He has what one and what two. So whenever you ask a question about who two, you got to ask which one are you talking about. You're talking about what one or what two. This is my Abbott and Costello theology. But anyway, so whenever people always say, well, how could Jesus be God when he didn't know when he was coming back? Well, it depends on what nature you're talking about. Did Jesus know when he was coming back as God? Yes. Did he know when he was coming back as man? No. Did Jesus get hungry as God? No. As man? Yes. Did Jesus know all things? As God? Yes. As man? No. So you always have to ask two questions whenever you're talking about Jesus. Yes, sir. What's your name?
My name is Lucas.
Hey, Lucas.
All right. My question comes with the, you talk about how God is being the source of morality. There's a common attack on that, saying that God cannot both be the source of goodness and be good in and of himself. How would you...
Are you talking about the Euthyphro dilemma?
Yes.
Okay. Good question. Euthyphro dilemma is something brought up in a dialogue Plato had, where basically it went like this. It said, does God do something because it's good, which would imply there's a standard beyond God, that he has to look up and go, I'm going to do this because it's good, here's the standard of good. Or, when God does something, is it good, which implies it's arbitrary, like he can just define things. Okay, Rick today is going to be good, where yesterday it was bad, right? Okay. And so this is supposed to be a dilemma. Because are we saying that there's something beyond God, so his nature is good, or are we saying that God is just arbitrary? Well, true dilemmas are A, non-A. This is not an A, non-A. This is A, B. Maybe there's a C. In other words, maybe there's a third alternative. And in this case, there is. God doesn't have to look at a standard beyond him, nor does he just arbitrarily make things up. God is the standard. You see, if there's a standard beyond him, then he's not God. This is God. So the standard has to stop somewhere. The buck has to stop somewhere, and it stops with God's very nature. So there's no dilemma here. God is the standard. Over. Thanks, Lucas. Oh, yes. Yes, sir. What's your name?
I'm Ryan.
Hey, Ryan. Yes, sir.
And I have a question which I've never been able to come to the answer to.
Okay.
It's probably the oldest trick in an atheist's book, and I was wondering what your take on it is. Can God limit his own power?
Can God limit his own power? Well, Jesus had limited power, but he continued to have total power in his divine nature, but in his human nature, he only had human power, right? In fact, he didn't have the divine nature.
What I'm asking about is the divine nature of his nature.
Yeah.
Can the divine nature limit his own?
Well, what do you mean by limit? The question is.
The question is, God is omnipotent.
Yes.
Correct?
Right.
Is there anything God cannot do?
Yeah, there are several things God can't do. Like he can't lie. Why? Because if he lied, then he's not the standard of truth. He can't go out of existence. He's self-existent. If he goes out of existence, nothing exists. In fact, there are things God can't do that we can. We can lie. We can go out of existence.
Can he hate and have wrath if he is the standard for love and forgiveness?
Yes. Why? Because if creatures are not, the question was, can he hate, or however you want to put it, can he punish people who sin? Of course, because he's just too. He's infinitely just, and he's infinitely loving. In fact, that's why there has to be an incarnation. Because God is kind of caught in a dilemma when he has guilty people, but he's also loving. He's infinitely just, so he has to punish guilty people, but he's also infinitely loving, so he doesn't want to. So what does he do?
He left out infinitely forgiving.
Infinitely forgiving. Well, he is infinitely forgiving, but you see, this is kind of a dilemma here. Why? A dilemma for God, so to speak. Because he wants to forgive, but he's also infinitely just. So what does he do? He finds a way to be just and also to not punish the guilty. How does he do it? He punishes an innocent substitute. And who's the innocent substitute? Himself. So he literally comes to earth and takes the punishment on himself. That's really the Christian message.
So you were saying that he lacks power to punishing.
It's not a lack in power. Like, for example, is it a lack of choice if I can't do evil?
Is it a lack of choice if you can't do evil?
In other words, if I take that choice, let me state it a different way. That's not the right way to state it. If I do something to limit my power, then I'm no longer God. I've actually decreased. I've moved from perfection to imperfection.
That's what I'm asking. Can
Okay.
God do this?
No, he can't move from perfection to imperfection. He's the very standard of perfection. Now, that's not a lack in him. If he could do it, then he wouldn't be God. In other words, we're thinking, well, you know, if there's some things that we can do that God can't do, God is somehow less powerful. How is he less powerful if he can become less powerful? I mean, if he can't become less powerful, I should say. How can he become less powerful if he can't become less powerful? Or how can we call him less powerful if he can't by nature become less powerful? That makes no sense.
So you're suggesting to be a perfect being would mean you lack the power
To change. If you change, if you're a perfect being, by definition, you're moving from perfection to imperfection.
That's true, but if you're an omnipotent being, there should be no power you lack.
There should be no power you lack.
Yes.
The power to void your power is like suicide. So why would you do that? Why would that be seen as a lack in power to get rid of your power?
I'm not suggesting it's a good idea, but suicide is possible.
For God, no, because then everything goes out of existence. In other words, what may appear to be a lack for God or a lack for us is not a lack for God. Yeah, we can make choices. But the only reason we can make choices that go from moral to immoral are precisely because we are not God. The being that is God is what Thomas Aquinas would call pure actuality. And any change from that pure act being to something other than that is a move from perfection to imperfection. So you're weakening God by giving him the ability to move from that.
Yeah.
So it's contradictory.
Yet God can weaken himself, but him himself is given nature to punish.
No, he still remained God. Heaven was still occupied when Jesus came to earth. As the great church father Athanasius put it, the incarnation was not the subtraction of deity, it was the addition of humanity. Jesus is eternal in his divine nature. He's temporal in his human nature. He was created as we are created.
But he has a divine nature.
Yes.
Does everything have a divine nature?
I don't have a divine nature. Well, it depends what you mean by divine nature. I'm not divine, but am I eternal? No. Are you eternal? No, but you have eternality. In other words, you're going to live on. You had a beginning, and you will live forever, but God didn't have a beginning. He's the only true self-existing eternal being. Everything else had a beginning and will live on.
So you're suggesting that I will live on infinitely.
Into the future, yes. But you weren't from all eternity self-existing. God was.
If I will live on into eternity in the divine, and so will God, and so will everything, and everybody, wouldn't that be pantheism?
No, because we're distinct beings. Pantheism believes that all is one is all. Like Brahma, it's like Hinduism. We're all going to be a drop in an infinite. We're just going to be absorbed in the infinite one.
But you're suggesting there is some unusual connection between God's human nature and God's divine nature.
I'm sorry? There's some unusual connection?
Yes.
Well, the only connection is that they're in the same person, but they're not intermingled. In fact, there were heresies in the early church where these things were intermingled. So they're not intermingled. They're distinct natures. Okay. And Jesus voluntarily gave up the privileges of God while he was on earth.
You said that Jesus was the introduction of humanity to God's divine nature.
I don't know if I said that. What I said was that the incarnation was not the subtraction of deity, it was the addition of humanity. Okay. So that human nature right there was created 2,000 years ago. Divine nature always existed.
And if the human nature was added to the being that is God in this form, how can God do that if you've just stated that God, being perfection, couldn't do anything which would make him under perfection?
because his nature isn't changed. The previous one that you had mentioned, his nature was changing from all-powerful to not all-powerful. In this case, his nature remains powerful. He just has created a human nature. And that human nature is in Jesus, who also has a divine nature. But those two natures are separate. It's called the hypostatic union in theology.
So then these separate items are both part of God.
God has no parts.
God is a being, correct?
He's pure act, so he has no parts. And we don't talk this way anymore in today's society, but if you really want to get into this, you can start with Aristotle, move on to Aquinas, and look at the distinction between act and potency. A very good book to read on this would be The Last Superstition by Ed Feser, F-E-S-E-R. He's a Catholic theologian who teaches at Pasadena City College, and it's a fun book to read too. But if you want to get kind of a introduction to this kind of thinking, act and potency, and how you can, in Feser's view, prove God without even getting into any of these scientific arguments, check out that book, The Last Superstition.
I'm pretty sure you've heard this one as well, but if God is an omnibenevolent being, why did he create us with a free will that allows us to be people?
Excellent question. I could spend several minutes talking about it, but you guys don't want me to. So let me just show you a 1 minute and 46-second video, if that's okay. You got to pay attention though, because there's a lot going on here in this 1 minute and 46 seconds. You guys ready? Here we go.
I'm not. Is God good? If he is, why is there suffering and evil? Let's assume for the moment that God is all-powerful. This means that God can do anything that is logically possible. So he can create galaxies and subatomic particles and rainforests and you. But God cannot do what is logically impossible. He cannot make a square circle or a one-ended stick. So can God make a rock so big that he can't lift it? No. So what if, when God created human beings, he wanted them to be free? Freedom's a good thing, but if humans are to be free, they cannot be forced to obey God, because freedom without choice is like a square circle. It's a logical contradiction. No choice, no freedom. God didn't want robots. He wanted real people. The first humans endowed with the awesome power of free choice abused their freedom. The tragic consequences of their bad choice and our bad choices ripple across the world. God is responsible for the fact of freedom, but humans are responsible for their acts of freedom. But let's remember, we don't suffer alone. God will put an end to suffering and evil. And God became a man to suffer with us. God is good, and he wants real people like you to know him, but the free choice is yours.
You can see that video again if you want. It's on our website under videos. There's a lot going on in that video, but as you know, the bottom line is free will is the only way you can have love. Of course, it opens up the possibility for evil. Now, there's a lot more we could say. I was at Michigan State a couple of years ago, and I could tell that there was an atheist in the audience who was very unhappy with me the entire presentation. He was sitting there like this the whole time. He didn't even laugh at the Simpsons video. How can you not laugh at the Simpsons video? Anyway, I knew this was going to be trouble during the Q&A, so he shot his hand out right away. It was a smaller venue than this. And he said, if there is a good God, why is there all this evil in the world? I said, sir, that's an excellent question. Maybe because if he wanted to end all evil in the world, he might start with you and me, because we do evil every day, don't we? We're always looking at somebody else. You know, why did God stop that guy over there? Why did God stop her over there? We never think of ourselves. We do evil every day. God doesn't stop it. Why? Because this is a free universe where we're here to make choices and be tested and ultimately make a choice to either follow God or not. And through those choices and through evil, sometimes we can develop character that we can't develop. You know what's often not asked? Let me just mention one other thing. People always ask, why doesn't God stop evil? I ask, why doesn't God stop pleasure? What seems to divert people more, evil or pleasure? In fact, we do evil to get pleasure, don't we? In fact, that's what most of the evil's done. You know, nobody does evil for evil's sake. Everybody who does evil is trying to get something good at it. You do evil to get good. Well, if God took away all good, there'd be nobody doing evil either. But there'd be no reason to go on, right? It wouldn't be a moral universe. So there's evil now, but in the end, evil will be quarantined. It won't be destroyed. That's what hell is. And those who are in God's presence won't want to do evil anymore. Why? Because there's no reason to try and get something you don't have, because you already have it. You're with God. You won't want anything else. Sin is normally a shortcut to get something, to get what you want. In this case, you won't need to take these shortcuts if you're in heaven with God. All right?